Welcome everybody to episode 313 of Coronation Street for a special episode. This is the Pat Phelan Show. That's right, we're going to have a whole episode today dedicated to the man himself, the most villainous of villains ever to grace the cobbles. Sorry, Richard Hillman, but we are Pat fanatics. And we thought we'd do a special episode dedicated just to him.
And it's the 313th one.
Ooh, unlucky for some.
Unlucky
maybe.
for Vinny and Andy and Luke.
Yes.
And that's it.
And many others
and
that
Michael.
he scams along the way.
Yep.
Yeah, we thought...
we haven't even said that this is the Coronation Street special episode.
I have said that.
Well,
I think.
I'm Gemma.
Oh yeah, I didn't say that I'm Michael. And not the Michael that Gemma spoke about earlier as well.
No.
I'm not
You're
dead
not
of a heart
victim.
attack. No, definitely
Not
not.
yet, anyway.
Right. We the time came towards the end of Pat Phelan's reign of terror on the show, and we thought, how best can we mark this momentous occasion? Because over the course of the 5.5 years that we've been doing the podcast, Pat Phelan has been a major player on it, hasn't he?
Yes, indeed.
He's one of the things that's kept us gripped the most to Coronation Street. He's been can you say the main character of Coronation Street, if there is such a thing? I mean, I know it's an ensemble cast and everything, but Pat Phelan has dominated.
Been the principal antagonist.
Yes, exactly.
He's the anti-hero. No, he's not. He's the darkness.
The darkness and the light, the creator and the destroyer.
Yeah.
And we thought, rather than just doing the plain old character profile of him, which is what we normally do to other characters when they leave or whenever, we thought, well, let's do a whole episode dedicated to him. I was actually quite surprised when we had a look on our character profile page just yesterday, because I thought we had done him as a character profile before in an episode, maybe like the first time that he left, but it turns out no. So this is going to be a massive celebration of all things Pat Phelan. But we're going to look over the other side as well. We're going to look at the darkness and the light, as you say. There's bits of the story that didn't quite gel with us, but on the whole, we are going to just be.
But what's the jewel in the crown of this episode, Michael?
Oh, well,
you haven't even led with the best bit.
As everybody I'm sure knows that's listening to it, we have got an interview with McIntyre, which we're going to play very soon.
And who
because
is that?
we know that's what you're tuning in for. That is Pat Phelan.
That's the guy that plays
Pat
Phelan.
Phelan.
Yeah.
As if I need to say. We were so fortunate.
So listen, I've learned through the years that you can't underestimate people.
Well,
you need to explain this.
Do we also need to point out that by calling this episode the Pat Phelan Show, we are making reference to the fact, ironically, that a lot of criticism was aimed at the Pat Phelan storyline, not from us, but from certain corners of the internet, and that's absolutely fine if you didn't like it, because everybody likes different things, but they were calling it the Pat
Coronation
Phelan
Street,
Show.
The Pat Phelan Show.
Yeah, if you do a search on Google for the Pat Phelan Show, you'll get lots of people talking a bit sarcastically about how he dominated.
Maybe we'll get references to this.
Maybe now.
Maybe we'll overtake the critiques and become. We're reclaiming the phrase the Pat Phelan Show.
Exactly, we are totally reclaiming it and making this a massive celebration. So I hope you'll that if you're a Pat Phelan fan, as we are, that you'll enjoy these next couple of hours. And if you don't like Pat, probably turn off.
Well, if you don't like him, maybe listen to why we did, and if
maybe you'll be able to change your mind.
Disagree if you like. That's fine. There's lots of things you can disagree with this episode, because not only have we got endless talk about how great Pat Phelan is, but we've also got the top 10 Pat Phelan moments, so you can write in and tell us that we got them in the wrong order, or we missed one
even
out.
If you like Pat Phelan, you can definitely do that.
You guys put this as number 1 and you're clearly wrong. It should have been number 3. Exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's going to be fun. But if you're a dedicated listener to the podcast, but you just don't like Pat, we don't mind if you give this one a skip, because it is a special episode that we don't do very often.
If you're a Coronation Street fan, then you shouldn't skip any episodes.
They can if they want to.
No, you can't call yourself a fan anymore.
Right, so let's just have a quick rundown of some Pat stats.
Pat stats, I like that.
Watch out, there may be a Pat test towards the end of the episode. He was born on the 30th of October 1963 and died on the 28th of May 2018. He's had 2 marriages. over the course of his life. Valerie Phelan, remember her? His first wife. Not sure when they got married, but it all fell apart after his first stint on Coronation Street ended in 2014. He also married Eileen in 2017, Eileen Grimshaw, and he has got one daughter, of course, Nicola Rubinstein, who was born in 1919. If you want to learn more about her, have a listen to last week's episode 312. Pat made his first appearance, I always love this, Gemma, on the 2nd of October 2013, and that was Gemma's birthday one year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was your
also
31st birthday.
2013.
Oh yeah, this is all the 13s in here. It's almost as if we'd planned it this way. This doesn't make sense. I've said that he made his last appearance on the 1st of June 2018. Is that right? I don't know, maybe. Oh yeah, that must have been right, because he died on a different day than the episode was broadcast, I guess.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, that seemed like a massive stint, but he wasn't in Coronation Street all the way from 2013 to 2018. Lots of people forget that he did have quite a way off in between. On the 14th of April 2014, we said ta-ta to Pat after only 30 episodes, and then he didn't come back on the show again until the 18th of January 2015. So we almost had a whole year break of Pat in between. As I said, he was in 30 episodes in his first stint, but since then his running total has reached and ended at 358, which by far makes him the longest serving Coronation Street villain, unless you're counting the likes of, Tracy Barlow and so, but she's just pussycat really. She's only killed one person, I mean, come on. Right, so I think do you want to play the interview first, Gemma? Because I think that's what most people are tuning in for, to be honest.
Okay.
We're going to play the interview first. So the story went like this. We spoke to Connor, gosh, I can't remember when it was first time, not the first time, obviously, about this, a couple of months ago, and we put the idea to him that we were going to do a Pat Phelan special, and he very kindly agreed to do an interview with us once it was all over. We knew that he wanted to stay fairly low-key, social media and everything wise, after Pat's exit had played out. There were interviews that were published after the character's death, but that was all recorded beforehand. So as far as we know, this is kind of the first major interview with Connor after his exit from Coronation Street, and could well be the last big interview that he ever does about Coronation Street.
Let's just call it an exclusive.
If we just call it an exclusive, that covers all bases,
also,
really.
we're the only podcast to have this.
Yes, exactly.
And podcast of the future of radio.
Yeah.
So
give us a podcasting award or something. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, enough chatter.
Let's stop
have
talking.
some more patter with
our
our Pat Phelan interview, Conor McIntyre. Here you go. To kick things off on this Pat Phelan special, we're thrilled to be joined by the man behind the monster. It is friend of the podcast, Conor McIntyre. Conor, welcome back to Conversation Street.
Hey guys, lovely to see you both.
Yeah,
lovely to hear you both and see you both. I'm actually, just to let the listeners know that we're actually doing a FaceTime, so I'm actually looking at these two beautiful creatures as we speak.
And just so that listeners know, he is wearing a hat.
Yeah. What do you think, Gemma?
It looks very sharp. You've got a very cool summer outfit on today.
Thank you, my darling.
So, congratulations first on your recent win at the British Soap Awards. Very well deserved that Best Villain gong.
Thank you, delighted, and I mean, and up against some fine actors as well. So really nice to finish my time off there with an award. Yeah, great, and hopefully, played a little part in what's gone on in the last 12 months. So yeah, delighted, absolutely delighted.
Definitely.
Yeah, how would you describe your experience that evening?
They're very nervy occasions, always, I think. But the fact that it was live and it was 20 years, and but I was fairly relaxed. It was great to be there with all of our gang. I mean, they're just to get together with your peers, and everybody else that works in this particular idiom, because it is unique in many ways. Soap is unique in many ways. Yeah. It goes, like a train, and on the Wednesday, you know, you can be divorced, and then by the Friday you're remarried and you've adopted 3 kids. You know, that's kind of the world we live in. So yeah, a great get together, and great to see all the other great actors from all the other shows. So it really is a get together, and to celebrate all the hard work, not just because it tends to be us guys the front, and we get the applause, and we get to say, thank everybody we grew up with and all of that. But behind that, of course, with a great team of scriptwriters, great team of directors, and all the crew.
Yeah.
And they're so nervy. You kind of always leave somebody out. But the crew on Coronation Street, they're such a hardy bunch. That stuff out at the lighthouse.
Oh, right, yeah.
4 o'clock in the morning, -10, we get big coats to put on, and of course it's cold for us, but they're out there all the time. The sound, the lights, should be a real heroic award for them. So so a really lovely evening, Really
you got such a warm welcome as well, didn't you, from the fans?
Yeah, how lovely. Yeah, really nice welcome. I was quite touched by it, actually, because you expect a normal applause, but there was a real warmness, real funness, and I guess helped by the fact that we'd seen him kind of go tonight.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was kind of goodbye as well, but it was very touching. Yeah, very touching.
And they knew that they were safe from you.
Yes, I thought I'd better reassure them from the stage and say, okay guys, it's all good now, you can relax. He really has gone.
Yeah.
We had the body bag moment.
Oh yeah, I know. Oh no.
Yeah.
That's the saddest part.
Final.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to speak to Brian Capron at all when you were there to share notes about your villainy?
I had a great chat with him, and what a cool guy. And I missed an opportunity to meet Brian at the Christmas party. For whatever reason, I couldn't get there, but he was there.
Oh, okay.
So that would have been a great photo, but we got the photograph taken together. And I had a great chat with him. He's a very cool guy, very nice guy. And of course, an iconic villain, So, very proud to be in that kind of company,
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very modest and very cool. And of course, in the background of the photograph that you guys took,
there in the corner
on steps, he's there. I mean, you couldn't have set it up better, could you?
No.
No, it was great. Yeah, really nice to meet him. Very, very nice guy.
Yeah. So the day before the Soap Awards, we'd seen Pat meet his sticky end, the hand of Anna Windass. What was your reaction when you heard how the final week would play out?
I thought it was great. I thought it squared the circle, really. It all came back round. Pat was subjected to things he'd kind of, made other people endure. Yeah. And of course it had to end up with Anna, didn't it? Of course it did. Poetically, it had to. Because it all began there. Many moons ago, and through all the other kind of episodes and adventures and everything else, that's been the one that's been bubbling away. I've been the bane of her life for the last 5 years, so it had to end there. Yeah, it was great. I thought
we did wonder whether she'd come back for that week.
Yeah, so. you couldn't not, could you?
Exactly.
Was Pat always going to die at the end, or was there a possibility of him going into prison and maybe coming back later?
I have no idea, really. No. We're not privy, really, to those conversations, and I think I've said to you before on previous casts, I don't really get involved with kind of going upstairs and kind of saying, well, what's happening with my character? I really trust the writers and the storyliners because they've done such a great job so far, so I don't really question that. I think, on balance, we've really asked the audience to come along with us. We've really tested their patience at times when we've taken them on a ride full of thrills and spills and so I think it was fitting that when the end came it was conclusive.
Okay.
I don't think a jail, or much as I would have loved to have been around there for a long time, I don't think it would have been as satisfying.
Yeah, the only thing that I think could have been satisfying about prison sentence is if Nicola had died that evening, and then Pat would have had to have gone to prison knowing that he'd killed his daughter.
I thought it was that was on. You posited that last week, didn't you?
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good idea. The only downside about that is that you wouldn't see Pat going, dealing with that. what he'd done. All you'd know is he's away somewhere. So it doesn't quite do. Yeah, I think we had to see the lights go out for him. We had to see that zip go on.
But before that week happened, we kind of assumed, based on publicity and everything, that Pat would kind of come to the street on his own volition, that he would like have revenge on Eileen, and we were quite surprised when Gary was finally able to overpower him and bring Pat back as a hostage. What do you think Pat's plan was when he was hiding away in the caravan? I mean, was he going to swoop in and steal the baby or whatever, or what do you reckon?
It's a good question, and I don't think it was about stealing the baby necessarily. But here's what I think. I think this whole saga started with a really poor decision. So Owen comes to Pat's house looking for money. Pat says, I haven't got any. So him and Gary decide to break into Pat's house and steal his prized motorbike. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Then they locked it in the builder's yard. So from that very poor decision started all of this. So there's Pat hiding out in the caravan, seemed to be quite content that he's under the radar for the moment, and he's keeping some control about what's going on through the kind of, the social media, keeping an eye on Nicola and the progress with the baby. And then another really poor decision. The guy decides not to call the police and say he's here, but to bring him back to the street.
I know.
So in the tradition of soap opera, one bad decision on top of another leads to absolute chaos.
Yeah,
absolute chaos.
It's interesting that you mentioned your first scenes, because a little bit later on this episode we're going to play some clips that we recorded for the podcast like 4.5 years ago, which is our first reactions to Pat.
Great.
Hopefully you'll look forward to hearing that later.
Yeah. It's been an interesting journey as well, hasn't it? The reactions to Pat, because the way and the storyline developing, and I was doing a bit of a chat with a magazine for a piece they're doing, and she was saying, it's just when those bits of humanity broke out in him, you're really rooting for him and saying, okay, we'll forgive Andy, we'll sort of forgive Michael, just draw back, just don't do that. Don't make the next bad decision that you're about to make. So I mean, our viewers and the listeners to the podcast have been great in terms, and I know at times it's frustrated them, but I think in the end the payoff was worth it. It came full circle, and what a ride! What a trip!
Well, let's talk a bit more about this past year of Pat Phelan, because last time we spoke to you on the podcast for episode 250, you were just about to start filming your first scenes with Nicola Thorpe.
Right.
What what's it been like filming with Nick over this past year?
Well, she's fantastic, isn't she?
Yeah,
she is.
She's fantastic, and mysteriously, like these things work. I did her screen test with her. So obviously she was fantastic with that, so fabulous. But and so she's just grown right here. She's fantastic. Yeah.
And now she's gone. She left Coronation Street on Wednesday night.
Don't be surprised if you see her back, though, will you?
Oh no, we would love to see her back.
Corrie's very good. Don't forget, I had a 2-year gap.
Yeah,
exactly.
People talk about me being on the show for 5 years and say, hasn't that gone quickly? Well, the first stint was 6 months, and then there was I went back and finished my masters, and then they called and said, "Do you like to come and do some more?" So I've got no question. Should she still be available? By the way,
yeah, I know.
No doubt, because there's a lot to explore. There's a great relationship between, Nicola and Eileen and Seb. All these things have all those foundations have been set.
Yeah.
So, and the baby, of course.
Exactly. So there's always be a link.
There's a Windass Phelan baby.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Exactly.
And what were some of the favourite scenes that you had with Nicola?
I'm probably not the best person to ask if from the point of view of going, I thought that was a great scene, or I did particularly well, but the one scene that springs to mind, which really shows Nicola's qualities, by the lake in the park.
I knew you were going to say that. That's one of my favourites too.
Well, even more interestingly, halfway through the scene, this thunderstorm starts. I mean, lightning and thunder. Now, the sound guys have got these booms up in the air. They're like conductors for electricity, so there's no question. They have to put everything down. So we had to abandon the scene halfway through. Now, of course, it's such a big scene, we can't reshoot the whole lot. Duncan Foster was directing. So we had to come back on another day. I think it was 6 or 8 weeks further up the road and shoot the second half of that scene.
You'd never know by watching it, would you?
You'd never know. No, and that speaks volumes to Nicola's quality. I couldn't see the joins. So from that point of view, that's one of my favourite scenes, because we managed to pull it off, really. And it was a very rich scene anyway. It was full of but she's just great. I mean, with actors across the board, you can have scenes with people are very small, seemingly insignificant, but they're very satisfying. The scene with Steve in the taxi office over the cakes, the buns, I very kind of like seeing. But one of my favourites. I mean, he's just he's a comedy genius. He's brilliant. And that look, that look on his face at the end when I've gone, it's just it's just great. So, but there are lots of those, and I'm very fortunate in the fact that I got to work with most people. I got some interaction with most people. So wonderful.
Yeah. But going back to Nicola again, another good scene was one of your final scenes together in Eileen's house, when you just come to the door, you had the gun and you wanted to see baby Zach. Do you think that Pat would have gone through with his threat and shot Nicola to get to the baby, or was it an empty threat? I mean, he was pretty desperate at that point.
I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that Pat is bonkers. You know what I mean? He can make bad decisions in a second. I don't think that was his intention, but I mean, my feeling was no pun intended. But my feeling was that he takes rejection very, very, very badly. Yeah. So he felt betrayed by them all. So Nicola was no longer the apple of his eye. That's not to say that he would have killed her in a heartbeat, but it was about his legacy with the baby.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment he decides to go down the street rather than leave the street, he thinks, I don't care what happens from here on in. Right. I just want that second or couple of seconds with my grandson.
Yeah.
Almost like an exchange of some kind. Okay. Okay, I'm passing the baton, or whatever it might be. But just those microseconds with him, and of course, in order for that to happen, Nicola has to be okay. I think that's the reason he took her over to the bistro.
Yeah.
I love that moment where you broke into the bistro with her in your arms, and you could see on Pat's face how desperate he was. Like,
The penny suddenly dropped with him that actually, for Zach to be okay, Nick's got to be okay. So.
Yeah. So what did you think about Pat's kind of descent into becoming an actual murderer when he finally shot Andy? That was a line that he was unwilling to cross before. Yeah. How do you think he got to that kind of mind space, and how did you feel about that transformation?
I think what happened very quickly in the scenes, or sometimes the scenes kind of go on, and right there there's an impulse that you feel, and you go, oh, it's a real thing. In the sense, it sounds very pretentious, isn't it? You all of a sudden really understand then the motivation in a very short space of time, because what happens is, okay, shoot him. So he sees in that moment how easy it was for that problem to be solved.
Right.
And very quickly goes, well, I've got one other problem. and I as I remember the way, of course, we've got no control how it's edited or how it's tightened up. And believe you me, we shot an awful lot more than you saw there, because they were very conscious about how close to the edge they were getting.
Right.
And so after we'd gone through the rehearsals of what we know was shot, and I said, oh, I see now. he sees the solution to his problem in that action, because I don't think that was his intention, to get him to shoot him and then shoot Andy. I don't. But I think in that moment he realised, oh, well, may as well get hung for keepers on, two's as good as one, and I've solved both problems. So again, another patism, another really poor decision.
Yeah. It kind of made him think he was a bit of a god and untouchable. Even when he was talking to Eileen at the lighthouse, he was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty good at killing, actually."
Yeah. I found out I was good at it. Is what he says, and of course that leads on to what I suppose I would say, from my point of view, was the most shocking one, and Luke was the most shocking one.
Yeah, those driving scenes when you were chasing after Luke, that must have been so much fun to film. But tell me a bit about how that kind of was put together.
Well, again, we end up back at the mill. So the other scene, I get T and Kelsey, Ollie Farns, were two really. And we me and Ollie did some really, I thought, some really great work. Bearing in mind that it goes like a train, what we do. It really runs like a machine, but both committed to that stuff in the cellar, and then really kind of oppressive. If you're really horrible to somebody and you're raising that kind of adrenaline and energy, for 4 or 5 days running, it's kind of. I said to Ollie one day, I hope your girlfriend doesn't shout at you over the weekend, because you're probably just going to break down in tears. And Ian Kelsey, of course, is just a great actor and another very cool guy. So blessed to have those. And then, to go with Dean. So we go back to the mill, back to the scene of where the murderous thing started.
Yeah.
And we've got to be driving there. But the whole tone of the conversation, I could almost feel the audience going, "Just walk away, Luke. Just leave it." Yeah. But the lovely thing about that character, I mean, he was spotless in the sense, well, he was unbesmirched, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You could argue Vinny was a villain, and even Andy kind of came in as a duplicitous kind of a character, and his character changed and softened. But
Michael was a burglar.
Yeah, that's true.
Michael was a burglar. He was. And so poor Luke, just after the truth, just somebody going, something's not right here, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of it. But you could feel all the way through, just let it go, just let it go. And of course, by that time, Pat is in murder mode and thinks he can. And of course, then you think Luke's getting away in the car.
Yeah.
So in we go, driving around the site. Well, fantastic, isn't it, for us boys? So we've got gunplay, car play, Gemma, really. If you got Michael over there, you wouldn't see him for a month. He'd be driving around. It was great. It's great fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really cool set of scenes, that one. And then the end shot where poor Luke's in the car and Pat's like aiming and there's no escape.
Yeah, say hello to Andy for me.
Yeah. Really exciting stuff, really kind of high drama. Yeah, and there he is, in the car. And you sort of go, wow. It was shocking.
Yeah, it was.
To actually see that play out, to see the car explode.
Yeah.
And you kind of going, oh, and he's in there.
Yeah.
It was great as a viewer as well, because I don't think we knew that was going to happen, did we?
No.
That one hadn't been leaked to the press, a bit like Andy being in the cellar still.
Oh, that was so great.
Although we said on the podcast, we think you might have Andy there, just the moment when...
No, we said we hope he's got Andy in a cellar.
Yes.
We thought that was too good to be true, and we couldn't possibly hope to wish for it, and then it happened.
Yeah, really love what Kate Oates did with keeping some of the big reveals a secret.
And I have to say, in defence, because I know it can be very frustrating for a lot of you guys, and sometimes they're able to keep it secret, and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And actually, if there's a suggestion that the story's going to get out there, then obviously the guys want to lead with it. So, but they do try. The effort that went into keeping Ollie hidden. Out and from that set, you saw some of the videos, under the blankets, coming through the gates, and of course the speculation was out there. Oh, I don't think Andy's dead, for a while, so that was taking along. So they really really put huge resources into kind of keeping it quiet. But you know, the other guys, the Paps and everybody else who's earning their living, you can't knock. They're out there doing their thing.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a glimpse of Andy anyway. So it was a genuine surprise, a genuine
really
shock.
And the same when Debbie came back. For a couple of episodes as well.
Yeah.
So good.
Nice. It's great. It's great when they can do it, and I'm fairly sure if they could do that every time, they would.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes it's just not possible. You know, people get the story ahead of time and stuff out there. You know.
That was the same with the fact that Pat was going to shoot Michelle on your final week as well. We unfortunately heard about that like a month or so beforehand, and we were waiting in the week, when's this going to happen, and it did ruin it a little bit, but I mean, still a great week.
It was something to look forward to.
Looking forward to Michelle getting shot.
And of course,
you should have aimed a little bit higher.
Of course, there are things like, you know, you don't know how that kind of information will go. But when you know somebody's staying for another year, or you see photographs of scenes that are shot 4 or 5 weeks up the road, then you know. Those characters are going to be around, so you kind of lose the tension. But on the whole, they do very well. It's almost impossible these days to keep it under wraps. So any of those ones that we can, and they're real payoffs. The audience really enjoyed them. You know, the real shock and surprise.
Yeah. So after Luke's death, the main scenes that we remember from Pat's time was the drowning in cement scene, or nearly drowning in cement, and then also nearly drowning off Whitehaven. Can you tell us a little bit about how those were filmed, what that was like? It looked cold, both of them. Very cold,
and I think it was cold porridge rather than cement. But again, I mean, if I try to be one of those cup half full, and when you see a whole crew out there, middle of the night, freezing rain, all to produce the drama. You know, great. I'm just like, fantastic. I say, just to cheer them up along that. I say, all you guys out here for me. Yeah, all for you, Connor. This is all for you. I said, all these lights are all for me. They say, all for you. I said, come on. No, I don't. And the whole dragging the bodies thing up, it just great drama.
Yeah.
You know, and bearing in mind where we are, the kind of idiom we work in, you know, that kind of stuff is as close to any drama that was on. A very dramatic stuff.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very dramatic stuff. Yeah, so I get all the fun. Kato said to me at one point, "Now, what else can we do to you? You know, we've nearly killed you, we've nearly shot you, we've thrown you over wall, we've buried you in concrete." And of course, Whitehaven was we don't call it Whitehaven. It wasn't Whitehaven in the programme. So the lighthouse, if you will.
Yeah.
Really out there on a limb, really cold and beautiful. You know, the Coronation Street had come to town, so all those beautiful people in Whitehaven turned out in numbers to come and see us filming down on the boat. And we were lucky enough. We got a bit of time to have a chat with them and get some photographs taken. It was great, but hard work. But again, I have to say, you know, we have to deliver the scenes and everything else. So we get looked after and warming up. But the crew out there from, you know, all the way through, from when we start to when we finish, 4 o'clock in the morning, bleak, freezing. And I just want to say, that is me hanging over the edge of the wall.
Wow.
And I'm terrified of heights. But, you know, everybody was in. I never heard a whimper or a whine. So I thought, well, the least I can do is go and get terrified hanging over that wall.
Oh, my gosh.
All his own stunts.
Yeah, no, it was quite a drop. And shout out to the stunt guy on there. So he goes into the water. So I've got to see this, of course. Now, he's been my stunt double for, although he's always delighted because he said, well, you do most of your things anyway, so I won't be doing this. He's straight off into the water. Now, I don't care how many, we've got a rescue boat down there. Well, you'd be amazed at the personnel there to, you know, make sure everybody's safe. But still, this kind of leap off into the void, so to speak, into the kind of freezing cold Irish Sea. Those guys really earn their money. Really earn their money. Yeah, an incredible guy. Oh, do you know, I'm ashamed, actually. His name's gone off the top of my head.
So
that was that long drive last night.
We'll find it out and say it later. So when the scene where Pat's falling into the water, was that you like against green screen wire work, and then it was the stunt guy going into the water?
It's a mixture of both. When you actually see you see me falling in, and it is obviously me hitting the dropping off the wall and hitting there. Then it's my face superimposed on.
I see.
You with me? For that drop. But the hanging over, again, we shot an awful lot more than you would see. But you see a long shot away. That's me hanging over the wall. Oh, wow. That's me actually on the wall.
So did they have you strapped in and like? Did you
sure, harnessed
but you
up,
just like, but you still had to hold on. Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, it's got to look like you know, of course, and you're up there. And the wind is blowing past. I don't know whether you saw. There was literally waves of hail coming through these big lights because they're 2 decommissioned lighthouses, but it looked like, movie set. But just these waves of kind of rain and hail. It was just, it was fantastic. Any actor in any kind of work, doing any kind of work, to be able to work in something like that, it's a privilege, a real effort and real resources put into it. So absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. Now, I loved it. You talked earlier about meeting some of your fans at Whitehaven, and we've actually got some questions coming up soon from some of our listeners who want to know a bit more about Pat. Before we get to that, though, can you tell us a bit about the importance of your relationship with the fans? Because you really do seem to have gone above and beyond to interact with them during your time on the street.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's not because I'm a particularly nice guy, or I think it's part of what it is now. And everybody, generally speaking, are very respectful and polite, and they're in the show, and they're invested in the show and invested in the characters. So it's been great. And somebody asked me, I thought it was a bit of an odd question. Well, it's for an interview. Someone saying, "Don't you think it's a bit odd that?" There's a lot of women who kind of seem to like Pat. Don't you think it's a bit strange? I thought, I think I remember saying, I think your question's a bit strange. I said, look, I'll tell you what I do notice is the creativity that this forum has brought to the table. Centered around feeling. Well, you with me, the conversation around feeling, fans or not fans, but has generated such I'll give her a shout out now. Shelley Ann, for example, who does all the videos. Rachel as Corrie poems now. All these things generated from this, and as you know, I'm an artist myself, so I love to see that kind of stuff. But the exchanges have been made, and I was very, very moved by a video that Shelley Ann put together with a few of the other guys, and I hope they forgive me for not remembering the names. Did a video thanking me, and it was like a members Facebook video to say, thanks for Pat Phelan. Through that, the storyline, and through the Corrie thing, I've met a whole new bunch of friends. Who I care about, and now we interact outside of Coronation Street. So, and you guys, met you guys through that interaction. And then we get to go on the street together, and these are real things. And now, like I say, you're kind of on the firm now, aren't you? People, the guys at Corrie know you, and can enjoy the show. So it's great. The fans. Let's cut to the chase. It's all about the fans.
It is. I mean, that's
all about the views.
What makes the TV show, isn't it? It's what makes it and breaks it.
All about the views. All about the fans, which is why I made a real effort to thank them the other night. Outside there, they turn up and come all that way and send lovely messages. You just don't get a chance to catch up with it all and thank them all. So I can take this opportunity, can't I?
Yes.
Everybody that listens to the podcast, thank you so much for coming along for the ride. It's been amazing, and interacting with you guys has been amazing. So absolutely, it's all about you guys.
Thank you. Right, let's get on with these questions then. Gemma, do you want to ask this first question? What was Morgan?
We've got Morgan's wants to know about Pat's capacity to be a good guy and whether you think he could have gone over to the good side.
Morgan, good question, and I think one of the things that gave Pat some longevity is that we all thought that was a possibility. That we all thought there was a dimension to him that was good, and that he could draw back from. He could not always be a victim of this pathology.
Yeah.
But the darker angels of our nature always seem to, run the game for him. So, yeah, but definitely had the potential to. You could see it there. You see his interactions with Summer. You'd see the interactions with Eileen. You'd see. Even with Billy, even when he's being kind of, what do they call it, tough love with Billy. I always read that scene as an act of compassion.
Yeah.
He wanted to scare the life out of him and say, listen, if if this comes around at another time, I'll come looking for you.
Yeah.
So just in an attempt to, because he says a couple of times in quiet scenes, no, I like this man. And myself and Dana have often talked about, another lovely actor as well, I've often talked about the small scenes that me and him have had, seemingly insignificant, but there's a couple of times that Pat has been on the verge of confessing, if you will, to Bill. Either in the Rovers, saying something like, if you only knew the half of it. Yeah. And you almost see him on the verge about to, and then we got interrupted phone call or whatever. But so there's always that capacity, and because he goes to church one time as well, doesn't he? Trying to shift it, trying to move it, but he can't.
He also saves Carla, doesn't he? He jumps in front of the car.
When you first came back. Yeah.
Everyone forgets that. I haven't forgotten
that. through his chip, lost the chips.
Through his chips.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think that's what I think that's what made him human.
I think that the relationship that they put between Pat and Summer was really important for that as well. There are a few really good scenes between you and Matilda. That just went to show that he did care for people.
Yeah.
In fact, those were glimpses into a possible other life for Pat.
Yeah, I think
you know what I mean. You could see another possible future there for him as a granddad. You see, if only things went that way, it could be this because,
So sad.
Yeah.
Fiona has asked, along the same kind of subject, what do you prefer playing though, a good guy or an evil guy?
Fiona, thank you for your question. There's a saying, isn't there? The way is easy for those who have no preference. I think if you got given a character like Pat Phelan and he was a good guy, he would be a delight to play. The way the guys have written him. As a bad guy, he's a delight to play. So I really, without it being a cop, I have no preference. I really rely on the writers a great deal. I give them most of the credit, because if it's not in the writing, then it's not there. So I think Robert Mitchum used to say, I do two types of acting, with the raincoat and without the raincoat. I've heard that transposed as with the horse or without the horse, but the same thing. So yeah. So no preference. I'm happy to be. I'm happy to be in where, So really no preference. Exactly.
I think with Pat though, one kind of like is spice for the other. Because the good side, when you're watching him being a good guy, it's always kind of like seasoned by the fact how evil he can be, and vice versa.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, one reflects against the other.
Yeah. Right, we've got one from Pete about Eileen. He says, do you think Phelan actually did love Eileen?
The big question, this one, isn't it?
I thought he was being deliberately hurtful when he denied this to her face at the end. My view has been that he did love her, but in his own narcissistic way.
I concur with Pete's thing, because when it's such a horrid thing he says to her.
Yeah.
But I think he's wounded, and very interesting with that kind of pathology and that kind of narcissism. When they do get injured, the only thing they can do is to strike out again. So, I mean, there was no. You didn't think for a minute that Eileen was in danger. You didn't think he was going to shoot her. You didn't think he was going to hurt her. But he did want to leave her with something.
Yeah.
He was being spiteful. That's what he was doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I read that scene and tried to deliver that scene in a way that he protests too much. you kind of go, what you really, really want to say is, I'm sorry it all came to this, and you were the only love of my life, and my heart's broken. Is really probably what he wanted to say, but he's a victim of his pathology, so, you know, he wanted to wound somebody. Yeah. It's all pain for him, you know, at the minute, so...
Bronte wants to know what your last day was like filming on set. Was that quite sad reaching the end, or did you have a bit of a celebration to finish off Pat Phelan's time on the cobbles?
There wasn't a celebration. I opted to do something else. There's a charity there run by. I'm not a great party goer. I'm a bit of a misery, to be honest with you. A bit of a homebody. So I opted to do something else instead. I donated on behalf of all of us at Coronation Street a sum of money to the charity there, Calm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Campaign against living misery. So on behalf of everybody,
that's cool.
Cast, the crew, rather than bashing, because like I say, I'm a bit of a misery, and everybody appreciated that. So, and in terms of sadness, we come together for. It's unusual to have a job as an actor that lasts for years and years. That's the unusual thing. This is extraordinary. I mean, the amount of time that some people have been on this iconic show, it's quite unusual. So I think when you've got a few years under your belt, you realise that you're here for a short, intense period of time, and then off we go. And it's, you see them in 20 years, you go, hey man, how's it going? All good, friends that you make, but it's not like you're always in touch. We're off doing something else. And in terms of the final day, everybody's off filming their bits, but a few people came to see the final scenes because, it's Pat, and it was that. So it hasn't hit me that yet. It may well do, but job done, and I think it was the right time. Yeah. Like I said earlier, I'm delighted to stay, for as long, but I always said, didn't I, through interviews that we've had, I'll be here as long as Coronation Street have got a use for me. Yeah. And Pat will be here for as long as they've got a use for him. And it seemed a fit time. Yeah. It seemed we'd explored all the avenues and taken it a couple of false starts, kept the tension going. But it was the timing. The time is absolutely right.
I was just wondering about your last day. Did you roughly film things in the order that we saw them on TV? I mean, was the body bag scene the last scene, or? Sorry, I know it was a while ago, a couple of months ago now, wasn't it?
We shoot so far out of sequence. Yeah. I'm just trying to think, was there another day? I think possibly there might have been another day, a short scene. Maybe not. Maybe I'm imagining that. So, but it would have been very close to the last scene. It's very unusual that we get the luxury of shooting in order, or we get to a certain pitch, and then it's a little while before we film the other end of that scene, as it were, But that's just the nature of what we do. It's part of the discipline of what we do. It's part of the particular set of skills that anybody that works in this idiom develops. Yeah. Because if you're not used to it, it can be very disconcerting,
It's a bit like how you don't get the scripts for the episodes you're not in, isn't it? And you have to kind of piece together and work out what's happened in between.
Sure.
Right, so we got one from Adam. He said, if it hadn't been Anna who killed Phelan, by which other character's hand would you have chosen Pat to die, and why?
Well, there are so many possibilities, aren't there? some that the more obvious ones might be, Gary, Nicola, Seb, but what about somebody like Roy?
Oh, he was there, wasn't
somebody
he?
Like Norris? For it to come sideways, to come really out of left field. That's somebody somebody that you wouldn't kind of expect it from. And it just happens. It could be accidental or whatever. But so I've had a lot of fun speculating with all of that. But of course, it had to be Anna.
It did really, didn't it? I mean, after everything you put
God's decree, it really had to be. Yeah.
Rebecca wants to know, throughout all your time on Coronation Street, what's been your favourite storyline that you've worked on, or your favourite part of the Phelan saga?
Hi, Rebecca. I seem to be fudging a lot of the question. I don't mean to. There are so many. It's been and I've said this ad nauseum. People must be sick of hearing it, but it's nonetheless true. It's been an absolute blessing, this whole thing, to be given. All the stuff let's go back to the beginning, out with Ian Pulson Davis and Mikey North, out at the building site and all that stuff. I mean, they were just great. They were easy. IPD is such a great character. He's a great actor, and he's a friend. I've really got a lot of time for him. Mikey North's, great. They were a great double act, those two.
They were.
And I'm sure that Mikey misses him. He's getting on very well and doing his thing. But they were great. When this saga started,
I like them.
Yeah, out there at that building site was just great. Generated all this that we're doing now. So yeah, and then sort of insinuating myself into Les Dennis's Michael and Eileen's world, if you will, and the boys, of course. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really difficult question. I really couldn't pull one out. I'm so grateful for all the opportunities have been given and all the storylines to play, because that's what they are. When you see something extraordinary, you go, wow, great. Let's see if we can make this work.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be leaving with a lot of good memories, a lot of good friends. Yeah,
of course. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Much more than that. I mean, you've been in front of a camera. I've been in front of a camera. The best part of 2.5 years. So, in terms of being match fit and lots of great memories. And let's not forget, part of the fabric now of that iconic street.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you how pleased my mum would have been with that. God rest her soul. So no matter what happens now, I'm part of Corrie folklore. Definitely. And I'm immensely proud of that.
Yeah, sure. Jack has asked how playing Pat Phelan has changed your life. I mean, he's been one of the most iconic, controversial characters in Corrie history. How is life for Connor different now than it was 5 years ago?
I'll tell him in 5 years. I've no idea how that impacts yet. I'm back to my studio. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. But there's no question about this. Whatever else you go on to do, you're always going to be Pat Phelan from Coronation Street.
Yeah.
Hard one to shake. I mean, Brian Capron's still Richard Hillman, isn't he?
Absolutely, and he's done a lot of fine work since. But again, Richard Hillman's such an iconic character. Yeah. And very proud of that. Very, very, very proud of that. Yeah. So we'll see. We've
only got 2 more questions left.
Okay.
Giselle says, "Who inspires you?"
That's our Giselle, isn't
question.
It? That's our Giselle, isn't it? Hello, Giselle. Hello, my darling.
She had loads of questions. We had lots of questions from lots of people. We had to pick out some, but she had lots. But we wanted to know who inspires you as well, so we picked that one.
Yeah.
Freya Lewis inspires me. The young lady we did the video for.
The Manchester.
The NHS heroes.
Yeah.
Yes. That young lady. That's who inspired me. And our award ceremonies are great, and they're great fun. But I was at the NHS award ceremonies for 70 years, and every one of those people that took to that stage, I mean, they're inspirational people.
Yeah.
I mean, really, and every one of them, to a person said, virtually everybody said, well, I'm not a hero. These people, my team who helped me, are heroes. So those people inspire me.
And do you have a particular actor who inspires you on the stage or in front of the camera?
Not really. I mean, I'm in awe at the capacity some of them have to, tell a story, deliver scripts, verbally or non-verbally. But inspire them, I don't know. I get inspired in the shop. Get inspired, you meet people at the council who've got extraordinary stories. You meet extraordinary people everywhere. And I have to say, one of the real pluses about doing Coronation Street is you get to meet people. For example, the NHS awards. I probably wouldn't have been there had it not been for the invitation through Corrie. Exactly. And by virtue of that, I meet these extraordinary people.
Yeah.
They're making an extraordinary contribution to their communities or society in general. It's really quite humbling. It puts everything in place.
Yeah.
And that's by virtue of having some, recognition or association with Coronation Street, and just people I've met in town, talking, and you ask them what they do, and just the most extraordinary tales.
Yeah.
People are amazing. With all the bad stuff, and we hear enough about that, but you meet some extraordinary people, and I've met some extraordinary people here in the Twitter sphere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Giselle's wonderful. Inspirational character. It's all about inspirational characters.
So our final question today is from Mary, who just wants to know what is next. I mean, have you got other projects on the go? Can we look forward to seeing you on the screen in future? And obviously we do have the pantomime to look forward to at the end of the year.
That's immediately next. But for anybody who's self-employed, or anybody who's in the arts, and who's an actor, the general thing is that we don't know what's. You could come out of here and things get very busy, or they may not. So I've learned to relax a little bit more about that. Let my guys do their work, and I gave it all my effort up here. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Can you just tell us a little bit about how this Panto's going? And was it Les Dennis's? Who was it that came up with the idea of you two being on stage?
It was Les Dennis's wonderful
partner. Thought so.
Claire has time. Claire, as Les tells it, as I remember it, they were at a show, and Claire said, wouldn't it be great if they could get you and Connor something? And I think it's something that Kudos had done, or the production company that do the Pantos. It would be great if they could get you and Connor. So Les sent the person he knows at Kudos a text. And he showed me the text of the week saying, this would be a really good, interesting pairing. And of course it is, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't wait.
We cannot wait to see you two back on stage.
Yeah. I suppose it's a bit predictable in terms of, of course he's an old hand at this, so we'll be very much in his world. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Very much looking forward to it.
There's going to have to be quite a few Corrie references dropped into the script, I think.
I think the audience are going to bring that anyway, don't you?
Yeah.
We certainly will.
There's going to be lots of shouts. He's behind you again, Michael.
I'm so excited.
Listen, it's been so lovely speaking to you today, Connor. We want to say well done for everything you've done in Corrie.
Yeah.
You've been one of our favourite characters ever, best villain ever on Corrie, and it's been such a treat to be able to speak with you again this evening about your final reflections on Coronation Street. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you two. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I think you guys do a great job. I think you are a bit of a dynamic show yourself, and lovely that we could meet in this context as well.
Yes.
So we might not be in touch about Coronation Street, but I'm sure we'll stay in touch, and I'll always tune into the podcast, so I'll be keeping an eye on you. And just a big thank you again to all the listeners, all the viewers. Thank you. It's all about you. Yeah, and I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and I'm glad to have been a part of it. So
thank you.
Bless you guys.
Thank you. Bye, Connor. Have a great summer, and we'll see you at Christmas.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice summer too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that, everybody. I was so pleased to be able to have a final interview with Connor. He was so generous with his time, wasn't he?
I know, he really, really was. He's been so great to the show as well over the years.
Exactly. I mean, I just remember, so I'm going to looking back, I remember the first time that we met him when we were in Manchester. What was it, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago? I can't remember now. And he'd always liked some of our posts on Twitter and sometimes replied and everything, but he's always so good to the fans. He would do that to everybody, really. He always makes time to interact with people on social media. I mean, he said in the interview that it's all about the fans. The fans are the ones that put you there. Without the fans, there'd be no show and everything. And he really did go above and beyond to make fans feel special.
Yeah, definitely, and sort of reward their interest and love for the show. Yeah,
definitely. So when we met him on the bridge, we were just walking across the Media City, weren't we? And we saw him in the distance coming up in front of us, and we're like, I think that's Conor McIntyre. It's Conor McIntyre. So we kind of...
Well, you said something.
We got up to him. Didn't he have his umbrella up or something? And then I said, excuse me, are you Conor McIntyre?
I don't think you said that.
Then said who we were, and he was so thrilled to see that it was us, like genuinely, wasn't he?
Yeah, well,
because he'd listened to the podcast. He knew who we were, and he made us feel really special, which is
we are special.
Well, obviously, and he took photos and everything, and from then we've just been like really good friends online, haven't we? He'd always was reply to us and make comments about the podcast. There was he would and a couple of times he's given us some feedback about the podcast without us asking to for anything from him. He's just thought, I want to tell these guys what I think about the show, and he's always been lovely about it. I mean, the biggest thing has been when he invited us to tour the set.
That's probably the biggest thing.
probably is.
Yes. And that was amazing. That was so incredible to be able to go, not just to see the set, because obviously anyone could do that these days. But
only £35.
But to spend time and see also what it's like. I guess what Connor's like with the people who he worked with at the time, and everybody seemed to really love him because he was so nice. Every single person, he was like, he knew they were, and he said hello, and he chatted, and he was so nice to everybody. And I'm not just talking about cast and crew. I'm talking about like the lady behind the desk in the reception.
Yeah, and everybody there, he was like they were his best friends, and he wanted to make time for them. And
that's probably why
they are so warm and genuine.
That's probably why, one of the reasons why he's done. You won't. I don't think you'll hear a bad word said about him. I don't think.
No,
because he's such a genuinely nice guy, and he's got time for everybody, basically.
Yeah. On screen, online, everywhere. I mean. Yeah, he just.
It's very difficult to talk about it without sounding like a gushing idiot, to be honest. But I guess if you've ever met him in real life, you'll probably know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
he's just got such a great, warm aura and charismatic presence. But as you all know, he can turn that into pure terror on an instant.
Yes.
All of that force of personality can be sort of harnessed for good or evil. So it's kind of beneficial for mankind that he's decided to channel his evil characteristics into a character on a TV show.
Well, I think that one of the reasons why the character of Pat Phelan was so made such compulsive viewing, and it was because the character was so charming, and some of Connor's kind of natural
it wouldn't
charm
have ever worked
rubbed off.
If it wasn't
it wouldn't.
That side of him. And I guess it's the same thing we saw with some of the other sort of villains of the show, like Brian Capron and playing Richard Hillman.
Lewis Archer, of course.
We
Nigel
do like
Havers.
a charming villain.
We do. He charms our socks right off.
Yeah. Get cold feet.
So, thinking about the olden days of Pat Phelan, we're not going to run through and do a whole synopsis of everything he's done on the street, otherwise we'd be here forever, and I've got a feeling we may well be already. But I thought it might be quite fun to go back to some of the early episodes of the podcast and find out what our first impressions of him was. Now, Pat first appeared on the 2nd of October 2013, and that set us. That was in line with episode 62 of Coronation Street. Way back in the days of double digits, we'd barely been podcasting for a year, and Pat made his first appearance on the show. So we're going to play some clips now of just the first time he got mentioned.
So just to remind everyone, he was only in it for 3 episodes the first time he appeared.
Yeah.
And then he reappeared at the end of that year.
Yeah.
And then he disappeared after.
He was in it for a bit of the first quarter of the year, 2014. But anyway, here's our Pat Phelan clips from episode 62, 63, and then 74. Look out for me not being able to pronounce his name. So they find out that there's this guy who we met in today's episode, Pat, he's been declared bankrupt, so he can't pay Owen.
No, he's been declared bankrupt, so all of his debts have been written off.
Oh, yeah. But
so whatever's left once they dissolve his finances and his assets, whatever's left, things get paid off in the order of who's most important. So Owen, being a small business owner, is right at the bottom of the pile.
So he goes round this Pat's house, just as obnoxious as his wife. And he's like, yeah, not my house, can't do anything about it. Sorry, I wish I could pay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's all above board though.
But Owen's, he doesn't beat him up or push him against the wall or anything then, but maybe next time, because he's like, we'll be talking about this again soon.
This isn't over, pal.
This new storyline, enjoying it or kind of warming up to it at the moment? What do you think?
I'm looking forward to it because I like anything with Owen in it.
We'd seen last week he went to demand this money off this Pat Phelan bloke, and he was like, oh, I can't, sorry, it's not my mansion. So Friday's episode we had Owen stealing his motorbike, which is worth 5 times more than what this guy owed him. Yeah,
Owen and Gary go to nick whatever they can, and they kind of break in a little bit, but not really. And Anna's very shocked when Owen returns with this motorbike that he's stolen. And even more so when Pat turns up to get it, and she makes everyone leave Owen and Pat alone so they can have a discussion about it. And he says, look, I know you've got a shady past because you had I'll tell your wife you had a fling with a stripper unless you keep it quiet and just give me what you owe me. So
then he does, and that was kind of the end. It was like, is that really the end? Anna is definitely suspicious about Phelan's intentions because Owen had arranged to go and meet him.
He's come round their house.
That's what it's right. Yeah, with his this nail file. What's her name? What's a manicurist?
Just a beautician, isn't she?
Beautician wife Valerie. Yeah, they're bringing around champagne and everything.
They've come round, and Anna and Owen don't know why. It turns out Phelan wants Owen to convert a mill into flats because he knows that Owen's the kind of guy who can get things done.
Oh, I think there's going to be trouble at mill.
Yep. And Owen, he can't front it because he's bankrupt, so he wants Owen to do it so he can get the money. And Anna, when they leave, Anna says, you're going to be the fall guy for this. You know this is a bad idea. Gary and Katie both seem to think it's a brilliant idea, and Owen is cautious, but he's sort of erring on their side of things, whereas I think Anna's got the right idea here. Run as far as possible in the opposite direction.
That Pat Phelan, eh?
Yeah.
What a wrong, a bit of a felon. I can't remember how long. I think I alternated between Phelan and Phelan for quite a while on the podcast. I don't know when the moment was when I actually when I clicked and I actually knew what his name was. But yeah, between Phelan and Nicola, sometimes I just like to call the characters what I want. So I like what we said at the end there about Anna. She should run away. What do we say? If she knows what's good for her, she needs to run away as far as possible in the opposite direction. If only she had back then. Think of all the drama and the problems that she could have avoided.
She loves drama. She wouldn't ever run away.
It seems like right from the early days there were shades of what Pat was to become. He still seemed quite... Well, we called him obnoxious back then, but it also seems like he was quite cocky as well, didn't it?
Well, that goes hand in hand, doesn't it?
Yeah, so he was saying like, nothing I can do about this house, it doesn't belong to me. And he was just like, standing at the doorstep and laughing in Owen's face that he thought he'd won. And that's, very much the same as his attitude towards, that we would later see towards Michael and, with Eileen at the end where he had this God complex, or where he thinks that he's untouchable. But I was a bit surprised to hear about the fling with the stripper. I don't know whether that sounds... Do you reckon that sounds as the Pat Phelan that we know?
No, it doesn't, does it? It doesn't sound like him. I don't know. I guess since the flat scam got all came out, he's kind of like taken the persona of a family man. And you can't imagine him really doing anything like that now.
I just think it seems odd, the idea that he'd want to, have a fling with a stripper anyway, because, I mean, I think one of the only reason he was with Eileen originally was for what he could get out of it. I don't know whether he was really interested in her as, a sexual object.
Well,
or whatever.
We've never really known why he married her. We just have assumed, haven't we?
Yeah. We never kind of knew, like, you know, what turned him on or what he was really interested when it came to the ladies, apart from, is this a woman who can give me a position of power and or a good vantage point or whatever, and I wonder, it just seems odd to think that he would just have a fling with a stripper. It sounds like, you know, a typical underdeveloped bad guy thing to say, but I suppose he was a different man back then. His nefariousness.
Well, he was also like a rich guy, wasn't he? And had all the rich guy trappings, like a beautiful wife and a fancy house and an attitude of like complete arrogance over everybody else and taking what he wants.
Yeah, I guess I could maybe see him getting to splash the cash at the strip clubs or whatever.
It depends on, like,
trying to impress his mates.
Yeah.
But then he's never really had that many mates either since, has he? But
no.
Again, I don't know whether he would get close to someone unless he felt there was anything in it for him. But I suppose that was the old Phelan who lived in the mansion, and that was very different from him. He's kind of gone from a mansion to, you know, backstreet terrace to caravan. He's kind of got, his living situation has deteriorated somewhat in the time that we've known him.
Do you think that Val's going to bring out a book about her life with Pat Phelan? Do you think?
Yeah, Pat Phelan in the early years.
It seems like we don't really have any, like, true crime is massive at the moment, but there's no like famous murderers or serial killers. It's all like gang violence.
Is it?
No, I mean in the news.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
I don't know. I don't watch the news. I don't know what's going on.
What nonsense thing to say. What I'm trying to say is that Val could be. She could be on podcasts talking about how she was married to Pat Phelan before his murderous rampage, and perhaps throwing insinuations that Eileen's the one that made him go mad.
I do.
She certainly wouldn't probably recognise the guy that he turned into, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's one kind of missed opportunity, that we never got to see Val in Phelan's second incarnation. Like, she was an important part of the storyline for that first 30 episodes of his, and then once he made that comeback a couple of years later, it was like, oh, she's divorced him because she found out what happened with Anna when he raped her. She doesn't want anything to do with him, and she was literally almost erased from Phelan's history at that point. I mean, there's probably a lot of viewers who they may have been watching back then but have kind of forgotten about her, or have started watching since his return and had no idea that he had this other family life beforehand. And it would have been good to have seen, maybe to have had her make some kind of dramatic appearance in the Britain's Got Talent week. Although I suppose if she did, people are going, "Who's that then?"
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I expect she's probably reading the papers thinking she had a bit of a lucky break, a lucky escape. Sorry, when she divorced him.
She's probably still living in that giant mansion.
Yeah, she probably is.
Because he started off in that mansion, then he ended up living in Coronation Street in a little terraced house with 500 other people, like some kind of human zoo. Then he ended his final days living in a caravan.
Yeah, how the mighty have fallen. And his nastiness has evolved as well, because he started off, he was a fairly generic bad guy, wasn't he, at the beginning? Just some kind of, you know, dodgy builder. It's kind of a bit of a wide boy, sort of, untrustworthy. But there was no kind of hint back then that he would later turn into a killer. I mean, he was a rapist by the end of his stint, and I think that was quite shocking when that was the proposition he put to Anna. But even throughout his second time on the street, we were thinking, is he going to become a killer? And not only did he, but he became a serial killer by the end of it, to match Richard Hillman or even go beyond. And utter psycho as well. I wouldn't say that he was a sociopath at the beginning, was he?
I don't know. Depends on. I mean, why not?
Well, he just seemed, in his first, especially those first few episodes where, just like with the motorbike stealing, he was just like some dodgy builder. I don't think they could have ever planned so far ahead as to say, well, this is the kind of person we're going to make him. I wonder even whether in those first few episodes, whether his return with the Mill storyline and him like raping Anna was ever a twinkle in their eye. But in any case, now here we are 5 years later and he's gone. It's been a couple of weeks since Anna stuck the knife in. What are your like final thoughts about his exit on the whole? Is it like, did it go the way that we wanted? Now we've had time to reflect on it. I mean, we were, after the episode was on, we were very kind of caught up in the excitement and the emotion of it being Pat's final episode. Has anything changed in the past few weeks for you?
Well, I thought that I always said that his final scene should be a week, and I don't feel as though it really was given a week, because it only really started going in the last few days.
Yeah.
Number two, I didn't really get why Gary kidnapped him and brought him to the street. It still doesn't really make any sense. It would have been a more powerful ending if he had come himself, really.
Yeah.
I guess that they wanted to give Nicola a reason to leave because but even though she didn't leave because she was so mad at Gary that she couldn't stay in Weatherfield, because she left to get away from the bad memories and stuff. So,
I mean, Connor talked on the interview earlier, didn't he, about him coming into the show was all about the characters' bad choices and Owen's bad choice, and then it comes full circle a little bit with now Gary's made a bad choice in the last week.
yeah.
But although I can see that, I think you're right. I'd have preferred for him to have come onto the street himself.
It could have still been a bad choice that Gary made if he had gone to attack Pat in the caravan, thought he killed him, and then left him for dead or something. And then, although we've had so many scenes of Pat springing back to life after he's been attacked, particularly by Gary, but yeah, if he had come of his own volition to the street, I would have preferred that. Also, I was so expecting him to kill somebody, and I know we lost quite a few characters out of this. I mean, I think we think Eileen's going to come back, but Eileen, Nicola, Faye, and Anna have all left the show, seemingly. Now, we didn't want to lose Nicola, so I would not have been happy if he had killed her. But there's certainly a few other people that he could have bumped off in his final.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because when they killed Luke, that was so shocking. Like, you can understand it to a certain extent with Vinny and Andy and Michael, because he had either no use for them or he didn't like them. But Luke just kind of he stuck his beak in and that was the end of him.
Basically. I think you're right. I think looking back at Pat's final week, in a few years' time, we'll think it could have been a bit more. There were some great scenes in there. I loved the bit in Eileen's lounge where he had the gun pointed at Nicola. I loved the bit where he burst into the bistro with bloodied Nicola in his arms.
I also like that shot of him standing on the street alone with a gun in his hand.
Yeah.
That was an excellent shot.
Definitely. And as I think I said at the time, I quite liked, for some reason, the music bit when he was walking, that tracking shot. So that was great. But there was, I think lots of people were expecting a massive stunt-filled showdown. I didn't
need a stunt-filled, but I know what you mean.
Because if you compare to, Richard Hillman driving into the canal, Tony Gordon, the factory's on fire and he walks into the exploding building, Alan Bradley hit by a canal. A canal? What are we talking about?
Yeah, that's going to be fatal every time.
Hit by a tram. Where did a canal come from? A lot of the other big villains seem to have had bigger, more explosive exits.
Yeah, but
and it's kind of ironic that this Pat Phelan, which is the biggest serial killer on Coronation Street, the biggest villain of all time, some would say, had a fairly low-key exit, but then I suppose you could say, well, he got cocky and Anna Windass took advantage of it.
Well, also he already had that big stunt week with the
Whitehaven.
The lighthouse stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did say at the time, I don't remember if I said it on the podcast, it's so difficult to remember, but he basically died alone in a corner, and all the attention was on Michelle.
It's what she would have wanted.
Yeah, which was a bit a bit sad. I really kind of wanted to hear his final words and, you know, an emotional scene, maybe redemption, maybe complete contempt. It would have been...
Well, his final words, I think, were to Michelle, sort of saying, Anna's going to go down a murderer, you're not going to lie to cover up or something. It was some kind of phrase like that.
But, I mean, there was no really any question about whether Anna murdered him or not. She just got interviewed by the police and then buggered off to go...
Yeah, I stabbed him, but, you know, self-defence, I'm off anyway.
Yeah,
I do wonder whether the Whitehaven scenes would have been a better finale, looking back on it. Because even at the time, we were a bit about it, because that was another week that was a bit of a slow build-up, but it was a lot more dramatic, with him finally being at the mercy of Eileen on the side of the quay and her stamping him into the sea.
Yeah, no, we said at the time, if this is it, then I'm not happy. Whereas we didn't really have that feeling at the end of when he died. When he died.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can definitely still see how, you know, where I would have preferred things to have gone differently. Yeah. And I've always said that I think that Pat Phelan's popularity is mostly down to how great of an actor Connor is, rather than the writing, because I think the writing has been good, and obviously they've worked really hard, but I still feel that there are missed opportunities. And it's been a bit sloppy at times with like all the missed links, and, you know, like why was Flora there? We don't really know. What happened to all the clues? Is Anna ever got away with? Is Anna ever going to get her conviction overturned about what happened to Seb? Don't know. What about the earring? That's not important anymore. You know what I mean?
I know
There's
what you mean.
many bits where you're like, that's surely going to come into it later, and then it never did, because we're watching a soap, not a murder mystery show or a police procedural show.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to analyse it quite to the depth that we do as well.
No, that's the other thing. Yeah, but I think that on the whole, we still think that he's the best villain that's ever been in the show.
Yeah.
There's been some very good competition. I think that other villains' stories were a bit tighter and obviously more condensed.
Yeah, but we still enjoyed the length of time that he was in it. We were never there saying, we've had enough of Pat Phelan now, this is going on for too long. I know a lot of people were. No,
yeah, exactly. But I think that the Pat Phelan storyline has definitely had ups and downs. I don't think the downs have been particularly bad. But, you know, there definitely was that golden era when Michael was still alive. And maybe that's what's been missing in his final week, or his final weeks, is that he didn't really have an antagonist. When Anna left, when Anna went down, you had, like, Seb and Nicola and that lot sort of trying to fight against him. But Nicola never really... There's definitely a difference with the relationship between Nicola and Anna and Gary. Like, Nicola was personally betrayed by him because he was her dad, and it turned out that he had basically ruined her parents' life and etc. Well, whereas like Gary and all that it was pure hatred. There was never any love lost between them. Can you see how, like, Nicola's was more of a subtle kind of really interesting relationship, but it wasn't fueled by her need for revenge at any point. She didn't really need to get revenge because he... I don't know. She wanted to catch him out. She wanted him to come to justice, and you know, like, she's more of a kind of lawful good kind of character. Whereas people like Gary and Anna were a lot more interesting because you knew they would do anything. Yeah, no, I think with Anna and Michael, one of the things that I liked about their relationship opposite Pat was how easy they were to wind up. Yeah, Nicola. Yeah, that's the other thing. You're right. Yeah, Nicola was so like intelligent and measured, and she never, like, she's more likely to sort of reap at the inhumanity of it all, and she could whack him with a brick. She could stand up to Pat without coming off as, like, you know, either
a wet blanket like Michael did, and Michael did sometimes try and act the big man and like say, you don't scare me, and Pat would just smirk at him. And then there's Anna, who obviously Pat would sneak up behind like Nosferatu and kind of whisper something evil in her ear, or just to her face call her a tart or pathetic, and then she'd go off and smash his van up with a crowbar, and it's just like winding her up and seeing what she would do.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the difference is that those characters are kind of like his victims, like Pat's victims, whereas Nicola, I don't think she was ever a victim of Pat. Like you say, she was like more, she was able to stand her own ground.
Yeah, her mum was a victim of Pat.
That character, and she wanted really to fight for. Though.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicola was crucial in Pat's final. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but she wasn't his enemy. That's my point. At the end of it, we had Gary, and the reason that I felt like it could have been more dramatic than it ended up being was that Gary had, like, Pat wasn't doing anything to anybody. He was just sitting in a caravan going on the internet. But Gary attacked him and brought him back to the street, and then it was all Pat reacting to that sort of first strike. Whereas Pat's never been quite that helpless before.
Yeah. No, you're right. And yeah, sorry.
Well,
look, let's move on, because we've been a little bit down about we a little bit about the ending, but.
No, I'm saying how I thought that it could have been different.
Yeah, different. Okay, fine.
But no, don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that Connor's performance has been the most crucial part of Pat Phelan. That's why he deserved those 2 awards that he got. He got the best villain this year, and also 2 years ago.
A couple of years ago, yeah, definitely.
And his performance has made this part. Nobody else could have pulled this off. The writing has been good on the whole, obviously, because Pat's been so interesting and complicated. But I would give the credit sort of like 70 to Connor and 30 to the.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at some of those scenes now that are going to go down in our memories as being Pat Phelan's best, be that from the actor putting on a great performance, the reactions to other people in the scene, or indeed the writing, because he has had some great lines written for him as well. So Gemma and I have spent a little bit of time earlier this evening poring over YouTube, looking at some of the big Pat Phelan clips and trying to put together our top 10s.
Top 10 Phelan scenes. You've got to be a bit clickbaity about it, Michael. You've got to promote this.
Top 10 Phelan scenes.
We've put together a comprehensive list by experts on Pat Phelan. I don't think anyone alive is more of an expert on Pat Phelan than us. And that is true fact, because we're going to be given an honorary degree in this, Pat Phelan studies. We have scoured our memory banks, Corripedia, YouTube, to find the top 10 Pat Phelan scenes, and we have ranked them in order from brilliant to amazing, and nobody can argue with this top 10, and you can write in.
You have done a better job than me at selling that.
For saying that we are wrong in any way, because this has taken us literally like 20 minutes.
It was not 20 minutes. It's a lot longer than that.
We had lots of debates about this.
We did, and we had so many scenes that we wanted to include that couldn't as well.
I'm being sarcastic. This was like difficult to do, and obviously it's a matter of opinion. We would like to know what your top 10, even top 5, or what your most favourite scene ever is. But you're going to find out what ours is.
Yes, and a lot of them are the big scenes as well, I have to say, but we've got maybe a few surprises in there as well. So, number 10, Gemma, number 10 Pat Phelan scene
this is like, no, we've got yeah, I mean, just imagine,
you build it.
Everybody, imagine this is like one of these end of year shows, because our ultimate aim of doing this podcast is to be a talking head on an end of year top celebrity shocking moments or something, top soap moments of the year. We want to be a talking head on a show like that. So now this is our audition tape.
Oh no, I didn't realise I was
so number 10,
tested.
Number 10 in the top 10 Pat Phelan scenes is
Michael falls down the stairs.
Not our Michael, because we live in a
ground floor masonette.
Yeah.
Michael Rodwell.
We don't have stairs.
Pat's kind of apart in his comeback, Pat's first adversary, who and he kind of swarmed in there, took Eileen took Michael away from Eileen, moved in.
Well, he didn't do
took
that
Eileen
like
off of Michael, and then Michael from that point onwards was just doing his best to try and catch him at it, catch him in the act.
Life to bringing Pat down, and unfortunately for him, he was not at all a worthy adversary for Pat Phelan. He was like watching a rabbit try to outwit a fox.
Yeah, and he also had a bit of a dicky ticker as well, which was his undoing in this scene. His ultimate downfall, but also set him back a little bit in this scene. So here Michael had gone up to Pat's office, and he's trying to make him think that he's got something on him. He's trying to say, "Oh, I've caught you out," and Pat's like in no way scared. And I just love the grin he gave. He's like joking along with him. This is a small fry really to Pat. Michael had found out that I was saying about Jason's chisels that they were talking about, wasn't it? Had Pat taken his chisels or something? I can't remember exactly what it was.
We are experts, but we're foremost experts on Pat Phelan, so if we don't know, there's nobody
possibly knows. Michael says that he's not stupid. Pat says, yes, you are, and just goads him about being a massive sap, because at this point Michael was sleeping on Andy's sofa. Andy, who tricked him into thinking he was his long lost son, and now he's friend made up with him, and he's sleeping on his sofa. Michael says, "Don't make fun of me," and Pat says, "I will mock you. It's difficult to do anything but." And then right at the end, Michael grabs his chest because he's having a heart attack.
Poor old Michael.
Poor old Michael. From the top of the yard steps, he falls backwards down the stairs, ends up in a pathetic heap on the floor below. Pat Phelan leans over the banister, very smugly says, "Look, no hands."
Loved it. Loved that scene. Yeah,
that was one of my favourite Pat one-liners.
If you're going to sum up the relationship between Pat and Michael, and in any kind of visual metaphor, it would be Michael trying to get one over on Pat, but falling down the stairs with Pat touching him, not at all. And then Pat Godin looking down and
making fun of him.
Yeah.
It really summed up their relationship, didn't it? Love that one.
Love that scene.
Okay.
Right, number 9.
Number 9, Gemma.
Top 10.
You go for it.
Which is when Pat... You haven't really written this down in a very great way, but when
we watched it earlier.
When
you
Pat
remember.
Pat was trying to convince Andy that he was taking him in the van to rest, for freedom. Then he crashes the van and tests Andy's loyalty to him, and then mocks him for running off. So actually happened?
Andy had been Pat's prisoner, which as we know, and which we'll come back to later in this list. And Andy is trying to convince him for all these months, saying, "Look, if you let me go, I promise I won't say anything. I'll just run away. I'll go to France, and you'll never see hide or hair of me again."
Yeah, because Andy was not a stupid guy. He knew that there was not very much chance of him getting out unless he could somehow convince Pat that he was no longer a threat to him.
Mm-hmm.
So Pat decided to test this theory.
Except we didn't realise at the time as viewers that it was a test. We saw him driving Andy down these country roads, and then the scene cuts to inside the van, where all of a sudden Andy's kind of thrown about, tossed
in the back
tossed
of the
to
van,
the side,
so you don't know what's
going on, and then you eventually realise that there's been this van crash. Pat's unconscious, seemingly up against the steering wheel, blood dripping down his head, and Andy is able to escape out the back of the van. His hands are still tied up, so he kind of cuts himself free for a bit, notices Pat's there, and he's like, "Oh, I better call an ambulance," really, because by this time Pat had completely brainwashed Andy into thinking that he was some kind of saviour for him. I mean, he was the only guy that the only human contact he'd had for 8 months or so. But then Andy chickens out of calling the ambulance, says it's a false alarm, and does a runner. And as Andy runs off, Pat's eyes flick open, kind of Terminator style.
Yeah, and he catches up with him in the woods and overpowers him completely, because Andy's a wimp.
Yeah, Andy's like asking for help, and Pat just kind of is making fun of him, going, "Oh, help me, somebody please help me." It's like, nobody can help you here. And he is like, I'll tell you what, Andy, after all this, you need somewhere to relax, put your feet up, I've got the perfect place for you. And he's just like, you're going right back in that, Sally, you failed my test. And Andy's like pathetically begging for one more chance. He says he's learned his lesson, and Pat's like, no good, mate. He helps him up off of the ground, punches him back to the floor again, and just does this kind of, I'm in control, I've got the power, that kind
alpha
of
male
burst of adrenaline kind of sound, and he calls him a mutt. But I really loved how they tricked the viewers with this one, because we didn't realise that Pat staged this crash, and it does stretch the boundaries of credulity just a little bit, but I think that's a kind of a running theme with this whole Pat Phelan thing. And I think that if you're a big Pat Phelan fan, one thing that you can do is put these minor niggles of things that don't necessarily make sense to one side, and that's not saying, oh well, we're better than the people who don't like Pat Phelan, because we could do that, because some people say, well, we don't like Pat Phelan because
no, but listen,
it doesn't make sense.
Bogged down in that. There's lots of things that happened on the soap that are ridiculous, and that's why we like them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when Pat's eyes flicked open, it was quite exciting. But then I also was thinking, he survived this again? Because already by that point he'd survived a number of attacks on his life and accidents and things like this. But when it kind of dawned on me that I realised that it was staged all along, he's got like ketchup on his head or something, or fake blood that he kind of rubs off, and just again the goading of Andy, knowing that he's the one in control, he's the one with the power. And Andy is just another snivelling victim of his, like Michael's. Absolutely loved that scene, and it was good that it was. I think I'm right in saying that it wasn't leaked in the press beforehand as well, because they were able to film it like in the middle of some woods somewhere. And it was a nice turning point for the Andy trapped in a cellar storyline.
Yeah, well, they had to get him out and about, didn't they, a few times, to get a bit of vitamin D or whatever.
Right, on to number 8 in our list now, and this one used to think maybe could come a little bit higher up, but we're sticking in at 8, and it's the lighthouse scenes that were filmed in Whitehaven that we saw just a couple of months ago. So Eileen and Pat have gone on a little vacation to Whitehaven, or wherever it's supposed to be on the show.
It's not Whitehaven. Is it not North Point? It's North Point.
North something like that.
Lighthouse.
I don't know. Anyway, Eileen has had an argument with Pat, stormed off, and then tries to phone up Tim for help to come and rescue her. However, we then cut to see that Phelan has caught up with her. He's got off the boat. He takes the phone to Tim and says, "No, this isn't Eileen." Just all the way through here, the lighting was brilliant. To have it next to a lighthouse was a genius move, because it just like illuminated the scene so well. And then we just have this massive revelation from Pat to his wife that has been strung along by him all this time. Then there's been times when she's started to doubt him, but he's always been able to convince her. I mean, a few weeks beforehand, he'd revealed to her about the flat scam, but saying, "Oh, it was all Vinny's fault," and then she believed him. But now he just kind of, there's nothing left to lose, and he tells her everything. He talks about 4 bodies, 4 souls, and I bore witness over all of them. This is the very height of his god complex, wasn't it?
This is where he goes completely crackers.
Yeah, where this is his massive, I'm the darkness and the light, the creator and the destroyer, the accuser and the prosecutor, the lord of hope and the layer in wait. I'm the worst thing that you can imagine. I love that speech, because it just kind of summed up how far he'd gone into crazy town, basically.
Yeah, it's incredibly hammy, because it's quite a dramatic speech, and it I don't think many people could have delivered it in the way that Connor did, because it really was really well done, even though in someone else's hands that could have come off to be quite cheesy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the build up to Pat believing his own hype, I think, was really well done, and this was and so this is kind of like this was the moment where Pat thought that he was all powerful, and then we see what happens to him. And that's probably why he was hiding in a caravan.
Yeah.
Because he thought he was the bee's knees, and he turned out that no.
He got overpowered by Eileen by the end. I think the line where he says, "Turns out I could kill, turns out I was pretty good at it," kind of sums up how his morals, his outlook on life changed since the early days when he couldn't finish off Michael. He had to watch him die, but he realised, as Connor said in the interview, that by killing somebody it managed to make a lot of things much better for him, and once you've done it once, then why not again and again and again?
Yeah, that's why I like the Pat Phelan story arc so much, because he started off as sort of like being a blackmailer, then he was a rapist, then he watched someone die, then he made somebody kill somebody else, then he murdered somebody in cold blood, and then he blew someone up. And you can the progression every time, like he's pushing on the boundaries of what he is going to accept from himself. Because I think the person who was holding Pat back the most for his villainy was always Pat.
Yeah. And
this moment at the lighthouse was when he kind of broke free of all of his bonds of that he had been labouring under.
Well, he always had that.
He had nothing to lose.
There was always that slight undercurrent of Catholic guilt in there as well, wasn't there? Because they touched on the fact that he had some kind of religious leanings when he saw Michael die, and he kind of crossed himself, and from there they kind of used that in a way to show that has he got some kind of morals? Is there some kind of goodness in him? But from this, it was like saying, well, God's obviously turning the other way and letting me get on with this. I think he says so much to Billy one time when Billy's in hospital.
Well, he kind of like went from, oh, I don't want to do anything wrong because I'll be punished by a higher power, to this scene where he's basically saying, oh, no, I'm the higher power here. I'm the sort of master of the universe. I'm the master of my own destiny. I'm the one that's going to judge people.
Yeah, but sadly for him, he ends up going over a rusty railing, which he even told Eileen, watch out for that.
Health and safety nightmare.
Oh, I know, totally. Well, she's holding the keys over the side. He goes to grab them. They do a little switcheroo, and he ends up over the edge. But that's not even the end for him, because after the break we see that he's there climbing up on the side of the wall. I really loved it.
You heard kind of talking earlier about how they filmed that scene, which is really interesting.
I really loved how he mentioned Todd as a desperate attempt to try and let Eileen, get Eileen to pull him back up. I know where Todd is. He's in trouble. If I die, then he's dead. But Eileen realises, no, he's a liar. He's been a liar all this time. And calls him so much. Liar, 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 liar. Stamps on his fingers. And there he goes into the water, seemingly to his death, but of course we know that he's got one last hurrah before his true finale.
Yep.
Number 7 in our list, Gemma. What have we got?
We've got Michael's death. Poor Michael. Do you remember what happened to him?
Victim number 1.
Yeah, he died of a heart attack while Pat was standing over him.
He'd been
to
the builders. He'd been to the flats, the Calcutta Street development, to try and find out evidence of Pat and Vinny and Todd's.
Again, as you could have guessed from this was kind of like the staircase scene times 100, because exactly the same thing happened. Michael thought he could outwit Pat. He thought he could bring him down. Yeah,
he had the evidence. He had the paperwork that showed that he was dodgy.
He tried to, he ended up running away from Pat and trying to hide, didn't he? Then he, Pat steals paperwork to make sure that he can't be caught out.
Well, yeah, he has a heart attack, and he's lying there on the floor, and rather than save or anything, Pat's first priority is, let's get this paperwork back off of him. And he just watches him die. He says, I'm not a murderer, just too flaming soft, you see. And then he has this little soliloquy about when he was an air rifle, and he's shot a rabbit when he was younger, but he couldn't quite bring himself to kill it. He's like saying, the rabbit was lying there, sort of gurgling blood. And I just had to watch it die, and it reminded me a little bit of Nicola, who he would later also go on and shoot, and would lie there gurgling blood.
That was a really good... I don't know whether that was... Let's say that they did that on purpose, because it's too good of a coincidence, really, for it to have been not on purpose.
Yeah, so the difference is with the rabbit, he shot it intentionally and wanted it to die, but then he got to see that sometimes you shoot the ones you love.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows that, don't they? That's sort of a common saying.
And then I just love at the end of it. He's just like, "Yeah, no, don't get up. I'm just going to leave you to it." He doesn't even stand there to watch him actually die. He just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave you to it. I'm gonna come back to you later." He says, "Don't wander off now." Just again, making fun of him to the last moment, and then he's not even important enough to watch die.
Oh, Michael! Oh.
Yeah.
He was one of my favourite characters.
I loved Michael. Just when Les Dennis came into the show, neither of us thought that he was going to be any good, did we? Like, what's this whole ex-game show host doing on Coronation Street? No, we all both had misgivings about it, but completely changed our mind instantly. He was fantastic. He was a great comic performer, but the kind of the sadness and just the kind of the snivelling wimpiness of the character he pulled across so well. And I loved the romance that he had with Gail as well. It was always a shame when he went over to Eileen, but I suppose it made sense in the grand scheme of things, because it meant that he could be a bigger part of this Pat Phelan storyline because of the link with Eileen.
Can you say that this was the start of his taste for blood?
Absolutely. Up until that point, we'd seen, as you say, the scamming, the rape of Anna Windass.
Those were sort of like taking advantage of people for his own sort of personal gain and amusement. But this was, bloodthirsty.
Exactly. Right.
Number 6.
Another shock. I think with Michael's death, I didn't realise that he was going to die at the time. I kind of hoped that he wouldn't, but it was great watching it when he did. It was you had to take one for the greater good. Number 6 is another massive shock. This is the scene when we discovered that Andy Carver is still alive. He'd last been seen 8 months previously when he had a bit of a scuffle with Pat in the flat and got whacked with a laptop, and it was towards the end of August on a Friday night. We'd seen clues building up in the weeks beforehand that something was going on with Pat. He'd been sneaking away, visiting this house. He'd had a black eye that one time. He'd been to a priest to confess. And that on the podcast, we were wondering, so wouldn't it be brilliant if Andy was still alive during all this? And we didn't know for sure, because like we were talking about on the interview with Connor earlier, they managed to completely cover up and hide from everybody that Ollie Farnworth was back filming in the show.
Excellent.
So it was the end of the episode. We see Pat going into this house, this dingy, darkened dungeon underneath this house that he was renovating. Sort of green. The lighting and the direction on all those scenes was excellent. I thought it really had a great horror movie feel to it, didn't it? Pat's there talking to someone about while he's eating a chocolate eclair, saying, "Oh, I'd have a chocolate eclair as the last meal. If I got put on death row, they're going to catch up with me someday, so you never know, lots of people would see me dead." This is where he kind of admits as well that I soon discovered it was easier to get good things in life by doing the bad things in life. And he was talking about stealing chocolate eclairs. So that's really where Pat's villainy first started. The old chocolate eclair trick.
Everyone's been caught out by that.
We have him quoting that Fagin song from Oliver reviewing the situation, because he's at this point mulling over what kind of a man am I? Am I a good man or an evil man? Do I go left? Do I go right? He's got this guy. We still don't know at this point who he's talking to, but he's obviously got somebody trapped down there. And this is the point where he needs to decide, am I going to go full on villain? Or is there still some kind of redemption for me?
Well, that was kind of like... it was in limbo, wasn't it? Because he kept putting off what he was going to do. But we all knew that there was only really one way that this could end. But the fact that he denied it for months, literally months, he kept Andy in the basement because he couldn't commit to that final step.
Yeah, when he dug the grave, didn't he?
Yeah.
He even, like, Andy was sort of really ill, wasn't he, at some point, and Pat had to get some medicine for antibiotics for him. But yeah, so this was the first scene when Andy was revealed to still be alive. We get Pat, we see Pat talking to himself for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and then he goes to go up the stairs, and that's when we finally see Andy for the first time. He's chained up, he's got his beard, shouting out, "Wait!" And our predictions, our hopes about what had happened finally came true. So excited about that.
This was probably
massive twist.
I mean, the scene itself is dramatic because you're watching it without knowing
for sure exactly what it is
going on. But so the scene itself, you can't really watch it without knowing the context. So that's why it's only number 6 out of 10. But like, this was probably one of the best moments
in the whole of the Pat Phelan saga.
Yeah, just that. There was no one specific scene in the Andy in the basement saga that stood out particularly, was there?
I don't think so. There was lots of very good dialogue,
really good scenes, but not like all of them solid scenes.
Because it was all just two-hander stuff, wasn't it? Obviously,
really great acting from both of them in those scenes, and also the lighting and the set design, just incredible.
I think Ollie surprised a lot of people in those scenes because when Andy had been in the show before, he was an alright character, wasn't he?
I don't think like Luke, he's a solid kind of young character, and especially for us, we don't really relate to those kind of like I'm just a good-hearted lad kind of people.
Yeah, but I mean, I quite liked him, and when Pat whacked him with the laptop, I was like, oh, that's a shame.
It was a shame because...
Oh, well,
yeah, because he was going to become an author, and he was writing a zombie book.
Writing a zombie book.
He was just coming into his own, and then Pat whacked him with a laptop and hid him in the basement.
He really was incredible, the performances that he gave as this captive, in the cellar all throughout that. Desperate.
And crying. Excellent.
Yeah, really good stuff.
So
right,
now we're
into the top 5. Jan, do you want to do number 5?
Now, this one is an early one, but it's a good one. Gary smacking Phelan with a plank.
Yeah, this was towards the end of Phelan's first stint on Coronation Street, when...
after he had raped Anna.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's more goading, wasn't there?
There's a confrontation between Pat and Gary at the building site because he'd been working Gary and Owen to the bone, hadn't he, to try to repay these debts that he says that they owe to him. And Gary's confronting Pat about trying to get it on with Anna. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Phelan was saying... oh, well, it's what she's wanted from day one. Your mother's a tease, and she leads men on, and when it comes down to it, oh no, not tonight. He was just like, really, he was winding Gary up, because Gary is so easy to wind up. And Pat was in such a position of power. He'd been for weeks just like getting at Gary and Owen to do the donkey work. Didn't he like getting to dig a grave for a pigeon or something like that at some point?
He was just being vindictive and petty.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
He
says, oh, your mother's a tart, and I bet there's dozens of others that'll say the same, maybe some on this site. And then Gary can't take it anymore and punches him, and then Pat kind of takes the punch, and then all kind of humour and all of the smirking, well, like victorious, like, oh, made you do something.
That went to be replaced with just this intense,
cold-hearted stare, like intimidating, scary, like proper cold villain look. He advances on him, chucks Gary against the fence, and then he's on the ground, and it looks like Pat's won this tussle, doesn't it? But then Gary, on this heap of dirt, finds a plank and sort of comes up from prone position, swinging this plank, whacks it straight into the side of Pat's head, who completely face plants onto this sand
I loved
pile.
that fall. There was
This
no
was
like
just
staggering or anything. It was like hit and down.
Totally just went unconscious instantly and fell straight down.
And I think that's one of the reasons I like the scene so much, because of the shock
Just
of the hit and the thud. And Gary's there going, come on then, get up. And he does look a little bit worried by the end of it, because he's like, oh cripes, have I killed her?
It looks like you might have killed him. And then, I mean, that scene, we picked that out. This was one of the moments when we really began to think that this Pat Phelan guy is a brilliant villain. So
what made it more exciting afterwards as well was when Gary goes off, and then he comes back to him later and he's disappeared.
I think he comes out with Owen, doesn't he? Or comes out with somebody going, oh my god, I think I've killed him, or something like that. He's on the floor, and I think they were like gonna sort of make a decision about what they were going to do about this thing that Gary's done, and then he's gone, and you're thinking, oh my god, where's he gone? What's he? And also, what is he going to do now that Gary's done this to him?
Gary needs to watch his back now,
yeah,
because we don't know exactly yet what this Pat Phelan is capable of, or maybe Pat Phelan, as I would have called him back then. Really, really brilliant scene, and I think that won our best fight of the year in the Coronation Street Awards in 2014 as well. Right, next one, number 4. This is I don't know how many people remember this one so well, and it doesn't have the dialogue of all the other scenes, but this was one of the first scenes when I really appreciated Connor as an actor, I think.
Right.
And it's the scene where he realises that Vinny has scammed him, taken all the money from his bank account.
Double scam.
And he just explodes in the driver's seat of his van. He's sitting there because he'd planned to do a runner with Vinny, hadn't he? With everybody's money. Goes over to the house where he'd been staying and realises that he's not there. He's left earlier that morning. He phones up very calmly, his telephone banking, and realises that his account's been completely wiped. His face kind of falls. He closes his eyes, realising what happened, and his partner, because I think Pat always thought that he was the main man in this partnership, but he realises that his partner's duped him. Then he got heavy breathing building up, and then he just goes, just completely loses it. And there's not very many times that Pat does lose control, is there? He always seemed to be in control of all the situations. He the one on top, the all powerful one, but this he's like completely loses it. She's yelling out, Vinny. He's gripping the steering wheel. He's slamming it down. And there's spit flies onto the windscreen in front of him as well. I loved how Connor let loose all his anger, and that was really, really memorable for me. For a long time, that was my favourite Pat Phelan scene. Losing
control utterly.
Yeah, when all this time he has been totally in control. Fantastic scene there. Number 3, Gemma.
Number 3 is when Nicola confronts Pat by the lake. So this is when there's she finally admits that she knows the truth about what he had done to her mum. He's raped her mum. And she connects that to what he's done to Anna, and all the time Anna and all that lot had been trying to warn Nicola about what was going on, and she finally sort of tells him that she knows what kind of a man he really is, and
but she can never tell whether he's lying. She says everybody, all these kids that I've worked with through my social work, I've always been able to tell when they were lying, but I can never tell with you.
And that was really interesting too, because it kind of shows you that he's always wearing this mask, this kind of like barrier, and almost is he really human? Is there something about? Is there a humanity about people who you can tell are lying because they know they're doing something wrong deep down, and they know the difference? Does Pat even know the difference between reality and truth, or does it matter to him if he's getting what he wants? All those questions are kind of like raised by the fact that Nicola points this out, which is really good.
I think this is one of Nicola's best performances on the show as well, when she was saying, you blackmailed her to have sex with you, that's rape. And Pat's just like, no, she willingly prostituted herself. And she's like, that's rape, you raped her. Been brilliant at standing up against him, not taking any of his lies anymore. Pat says, it was a transaction, Nick, a transaction. Just trying to justify himself there, but she's not having any of it. She starts to walk away. All this time, she's in control.
Away.
She's walking away, and he's desperately trying to follow after. He's in the pathetic position there, and she's for once in control. He starts hitting himself on the head. I love this. It was a bit like the exploding in the van scene. This is another example of Pat losing control and not being able to cope with it, and the fact that he's whacking himself on the head.
He can't get things to go the way he wants.
Yeah, he's always able to control the situation and maneuver things into his way, but not this time. He's going, no, why don't you believe me, Nick? You have to believe me. She walks off saying, don't you ever come near us again. He yells, Nicola, to the sky. Fantastic performances from both actors there. Really, really powerful scene, and that was kind of one of the first moments where the tables were starting to turn on Pat, and he realised that he can't always get his way. Number 2 is Luke's death.
Poor Luke.
2018, January, the year had barely started when Luke was snooping around the place where Andy and Vinny's...
don't concern him.
Yes, where Andy and Vinny's bodies were buried in the lake. A little bit too much. And he realises what Pat's done. I loved this scene. The car chase was amazing. It took me right back to the scenes where Luke was doing all this stunt driving as well a few years beforehand. But it was quite a long little driving scene, wasn't there? And he's kind of looking in his his wing mirrors, looking behind him. Pat's there, just like, I mean, we say Terminator a lot, don't we? It's just like somebody who's coming after you and is going to hunt you down, whatever. And Pat is, even though he's just been having a bit of a scuffle with Luke at the mill, he's got his heart set on stopping this guy. He's not gonna let him escape. Eventually, Pat's able to run Luke into a big pile of rubble, right? I mean, he can't get out of the car, the door's jammed, and it's a nice long scene. This one, they don't try and get it over with quickly. We see Pat kind of getting something out of the glove box, kind of cuts to Luke looking terrified. We see Pat going into the back of the van, slowly putting on his gloves, and all the time watching it, we're thinking, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? He grabs the gun from the back of the van. Luke's desperately trying to get his engine to start so he can drive away, but he can't.
Yeah.
He tries to crawl into the back, and then Pat grabs the gun, or holds up the gun, shoots through the front window, and Luke falls down onto the seat, and we're like, is he dead? Is he dead? But no, we can still see Luke is still alive here. Pat gets back into the car, reverses a bit, shouts out, well, you came looking for Andy, looks like you found him, you say hello from me. Puts his gun out onto the wing mirror, shoot onto the petrol tank, and boom, it explodes in a massive
boom.
ball of flames. He winds up the window, car's on fire. This was so tense. This was another one that we didn't really see coming, wasn't it?
No, totally shocked, couldn't believe it, because we didn't know that he was leaving.
No.
And he'd been such an inoffensive character, Luke's a cool guy, but you never sort of would have thought that his exit would have been so explosive. And he was like, a nice guy, so the fact that he was murdered was even more shocking.
Yeah, and all the after effects of his murder as well. I mean, I could have done without the whiny Alia, but
Alia really ramped up as being an annoying character even more, and it was really this that was the trigger.
Yeah, but the actual scene itself, I love the fireball. I love his line about saying hello to Andy, and Dean Fagan did a fantastic job of just the look of despair in his eyes, like he knew that it was all hopeless. There's nothing I can do. When he was lying there after he'd been shot through the window first, and he literally couldn't even get up, and just to hear Pat say these final lines, it was such a terrifying situation, and Dean did a really, really good job of playing the hopeless victim. So we've done our 10 to 2, and before we get to number 1, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of our honourable mentions, about the Pat Phelan scenes that didn't quite make it into our list. I'm sure some of you might have guessed what might be at number 1 at the moment, but we had so many more that we wanted to mention but couldn't. For example, what almost made it onto this probably would have been number 11 if we could have gone that far. I loved the scene where Pat takes Eileen out onto the roof at Calcutta Street to kind of show, he calls her the queen of all you survey. This was sort of midway through the Pat's Flat scamming storyline, and it kind of it showed just how untouchable he thought he was at that time, like the king of the Calcutta Street, I guess. Eileen was there. She was completely under his spell. She looked so kind of beautiful and radiant and happy, like on top of the world. It was almost like a Titanic, I'm the king of the world kind of scene, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He says, you've done a great thing, Eileen, kind of been involved in this, and she's like, no, we've done a good thing together. So she was completely under his spell. What I really loved about this scene as well was when he takes her over to the edge. All the time you're thinking, is he going to push her over the edge? Is this going to be the end of Eileen? Vinny's kind of down there on the floor, and whatever Pat's going to do, he was in on it as well. Pat also takes the opportunity to make Eileen say some really horrible things about Todd. He's been able to sort of drip in the poison there. And then at the end of the scene, Pat's like, you know, I said I had a surprise for you. It's not this. You're going to get your real surprise right now. And again, I was thinking, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? And then the scene cut. It looked like could he push her? Could he propose to her? And then the next time we saw them, they were coming back down, and we didn't know exactly what had happened there. So I absolutely loved that scene. What are some other Pat scenes that stand out to you that we haven't quite managed to get into the top 10?
Well, we've also got the bit where it's revealed that Pat actually didn't fall off. Well, he did fall off the side of a lighthouse, but he survived.
Yes.
Which came immediately after the week where we thought he had died. And I'm so glad that they didn't leave it too long before revealing this, because I think people would have guessed quite easily. As it was, we weren't convinced that he had died.
Yeah, I loved that. That was a bit like the Andy's Still Alive scene, wasn't it? Where Pat was talking to somebody, and then at the end of the scene we realised who it was. This one, it was his B&B owner, this Mrs. Gillen was it, I think, and we get to see that it's Pat fairly quickly, but there is that 30 seconds or so where she's walking in with her tray and whittering on about something, and then we see Pat's there in the bed, and I love that line there where she says at the end, night, don't let the frost bite or something, and she thinks she's made this amazing joke based on his name. That was a great scene. What else have you got? I loved, I mean, there was the fight with Andy where he hits him with a laptop. That camera angle where from Andy's point of view looking up at Pat is a quite iconic Pat Phelan shot, wasn't it, with a laptop being slammed down onto Andy, or slammed down onto the camera. That was a great one.
That was really shocking. Also the bit where Andy has a nightmare about Pat, and all these giant cats are coming after him, and he's
fun.
Yeah. We also haven't mentioned the bit where Pat falls into the cement as well, where he was trying to dispose of Vinny and Andy's bodies.
No,
and he's
I know.
dragging them through the sort of the abandoned building site in the middle of the rainstorm, and
I did enjoy
he gets trapped
that
in the cement himself. It's so difficult to pick.
I did enjoy that, but I just thought that was sullied a little bit by how easily he was rescued. I liked him dragging all the stuff up, but I just didn't quite feel that he was in any danger. And then all of a sudden Tim and Eileen come and they rescue him, and it was spoilt. It was over a little bit too quickly, but yeah, the atmosphere, the lightning and everything that was going on in the background, that was all fantastic.
There's also the bit that we haven't forgotten, as I mentioned in the interview with Connor, where Pat chucks his chips on the floor to rescue Carla from those evil bag snatchers
that was a good scene.
Trying to kill her.
I enjoyed what was another one? Oh, when Pat scares Billy into going into rehab, kind of using his villainous ways to try for some kind of good.
Like, he was just like shouting at him and shaking him and
making him realise that he needs to do this for Summer's sake, for everyone.
Yeah, and he did that for Summer, didn't he?
Mm.
Yeah.
We haven't really mentioned any Anna scenes, have we? In all of
I
this,
know.
Considering how important Anna was in his story. I mean, I did like the bit where she was smashing up his car and he was just standing there watching and smirking. The same bit, the scene where Anna slapped Seb in the cafe, and again, Phelan was there, just like, you've played completely into my hands.
Yeah, there's a bit where he threatens her in the cafe as well.
Oh yeah, he pushes her up against the wall, and she ends up getting rescued by Kevin, I think, in the end. I like the bit. Do you remember when he goes around her house once and she tries to record him on her phone?
Yeah,
and it doesn't work. He realises he was always one step ahead of her. But there were some great and Anna and Pat scenes as well. I also liked as another Nicola scene that one where she was in hospital and he disowns her. There were a couple of scenes throughout his time when a little tear would roll down his cheek, and I was always a bit of a sucker for a Pat Phelan tear. And when he realised that there was nothing he could do to get Nicola back on his side again, and he cries, tragic stuff. But we move now on to our number one. What was the best
one, Michael, of all the Pat Phelan moments that have ever been
Pat Phelan
on Coronation Street? What is the best one?
Well, it is of course Andy and Vinny's deaths.
Now this was epic. This was amazing. It was dark. It was creepy. It was atmospheric.
Such good direction.
Shot in a like an abandoned mill. At night during a rainstorm.
There's every so often on Coronation Street, I'll get a scene where I'm completely on the edge of my seat. I'm feeling all tense and nervous inside. I'm completely hooked on what I'm watching, and this was one of those scenes. I was sitting there because I watched this when you were away one time. I didn't watch it with you, did I? And I was literally sitting there with my hand over my mouth. I didn't know what was going to happen. We thought that maybe at the end of that episode, either Andy or Vinny would die, but who would kill them? Which one of the two would it be? And we could never have predicted that it went down the way it did. So basically, Pat had taken Andy and Vinny in his van to this abandoned mill. Andy could... Do you remember there was the bit outside where Vinny was going to jump Pat, but Andy warned him. He was like, Pat, watch out, because again, he's been brainwashed.
Because he was saying they were in the back of the van, and they were trying to. Vinny was trying to hatch a plan, and it goes to show you the difference in their personalities as well. Because there's no way Vinny would have been stuck down in that cellar for as long as Andy did.
No.
Even before Andy was captured, he had that kind of personality where he wouldn't take risks. And Vinny's risk-taking kind of go-hung attitude, that's why he was involved in the flat scam in the first place.
Exactly. Now, when Vinny tried to jump Pat, they were able to knock him out, and they dragged him into this mill, laid him out on a mat, and this was obviously set up to be some kind of murder scene. And Pat had been...
Talk about premeditation.
Pat had been trying to convince Andy that Vinny was the cause of Michael's death. Michael wasn't Andy's dad, but he was kind of like some kind of surrogate father, wasn't he? That was quickly developed over the course of 6 months or so, a few years beforehand. And Pat really goads Andy into thinking that he did it, that Vinny was there with a gun. He tried to shoot Michael, but the gun jammed, and Michael's got so scared that he didn't even need the gun anymore, and he dies of a heart attack. Andy's there with Pat kind of like holding the gun with him. Pat's saying, "Do it, Andy, save yourself, pull the trigger, do it, Andy." And he does.
Yeah, he does it.
He shoots Vinny. I loved how, like, that when he's there holding the gun, you can see the camera's kind of in front of Andy and Pat, so you can see the looks on their faces. Andy doesn't know what to do. He's terrified, and Pat's just there like evilly manipulating him to do what he wanted. But then when the actual shot was fired, we get to see behind them and Vinny falling over backwards.
Oh, I know, awful.
And then after that, Pat manages to take the gun off of Andy, who's whimpering away.
Andy turns the gun on him. And
that's right. Yeah, just for a minute you think, oh my gosh, is he going to kill Phelan?
Oh,
and I'm like, you think, have I seen so many Pat shots? Is Pat still going to be in it? I don't know. But yeah, Pat manages to fairly easily get the gun off of him and then raises it straight to him. And that was like, oh my gosh, he's going to kill Andy as well. Andy's like trying to say to him, you can't do it, can you? Look, I know you more than anybody. You're not a murderer. You've done some bad things, but you've changed. You can't do it, can you? You're a good man, Pat. And this was kind of ties back to what we were saying earlier about Pat thinking, am I a good man or am I a bad man? Andy's trying to latch onto that and tell him, no, this isn't you. You're no murderer. And Pat's like, you don't know me. Cuts to outside.
Yes.
Just a few seconds of silence and then a bang.
Yeah.
Pause. And I'm like, that's what's happened. Has Pat shot him? Has Andy managed to get the gun off him? Has Pat shot into the ceiling? Like, no, I can't do it. But no, it then cuts to inside the mill again. Andy's viewpoint, dead Andy's viewpoint, looking up at Pat from below. And then we get to see from above, Andy's lying alongside Vinny, both dead.
Oh, awful.
Pat puts his head in his hands and he's kind of thinking there in silence. Lots of long silences which gives you, as a viewer, the opportunity to just take a breather and reflect on what's happened. And Pat's like, I'm really sorry, kid. I had to. You wouldn't have been able to live with yourself. So he's trying to justify it to himself, maybe. I had to kill you because
everyone knew that there was no way that he could get out of this, that you can't keep somebody in a bunker, I mean, in the
cellar,
for months and months and months, and then expect them to not say anything. And
no, we always wondered what was going to happen.
Genuinely thought he wasn't ever going to dob him in. You know that as soon as he got away from there, there was nothing to stop him from doing it.
So what made that scene number one for you over all the others?
Well, it was. I mean, it could have been in a movie, couldn't it? It was so
really
cinematic. Was. The darkness and the rain and all the cliches.
So atmospheric. It was cliche in a way.
But that's why they're cliches though, because they work so well to create a really dramatic scene, and you didn't know, although
it was almost like you weren't watching a soap, and lots of people criticised the scene because of that. They're saying that this isn't what Coronation Street is, but I think as a soap it can be anything. It can be a horror one day, it can be a comedy the next, it can be a mystery, a thriller, or whatever, and they push the boundaries of what you could show before the watershed for sure.
And this is definitely, I think, the darkest scene, the darkest Pat Phelan scene of all time, and that's why I like the storyline so much, because I like the dark bits. I like the murders and the secrets and the betrayals and the whole scene was really intense, because Andy had the gun for quite a lot of it, and it was, can Andy redeem himself? Can he do the difficult thing? Can he turn the gun on Pat?
Yeah.
And it was, that a lot of people like to sort of say that it was wrong because nobody in real life would have done that, but we've spoken before about, how difficult it is when you're in that situation, and I genuinely think that Andy's character was true to the way that he'd been written the entire time.
Well, it was just like that time when Eileen came to visit him in the cellar, or came to visit Pat, and Andy could have called out to say that he was there, but he was so under
scared.
The thumb.
He was just paralysed by fear. And the other thing was that when he had the gun and he was turning it on Pat still had control of him, because Pat has always been the one that told him what to do, and Andy kind of like almost craved that kind of giving up power completely. And there was really no way that he would have killed Pat, I don't think. No,
because he wasn't a killer either. He says that Pat wasn't a killer.
Well, he just killed Vinny. Let's not forget. That kind of like tense bit where you didn't know whether he was going to give the gun to shot at Pat, and then when Pat got the gun, what is he going to do now? It seemed pretty clear that Pat was going to kill Andy, because that's the only way that you can really have a satisfying resolution that doesn't involve him back in the bloody cellar again. So in just like that bit where it cut away to the outside, and then you hear that gunshot, and it was just sickening, wasn't it? Because you knew
something,
and it was almost worse because you didn't get to see that final moment.
Yeah, your imagination's just going wild for just those few seconds.
You don't know whether Pat said anything to him before he killed him, or how was Andy? He's probably on his knees begging. Gosh, this would have been horrible to have seen it, but it's even worse not to have, because you can imagine all kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go, our top 10 Pat Phelan scenes.
Do you agree?
Probably not.
No.
We missed out some important scenes?
Probably. Loads.
Yeah, so if you...
Tell us what you think.
If you want to do tell us what you think, let us know. So the question that we're left with, I'd quite like to talk about next, is, was he Coronation Street's best ever villain? Can we justify that? How does he compare to the rest?
He was.
Because
the end.
It's just not as simple as that. Richard Hillman was always the benchmark, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Ever since the early 2000s, that he went on his serial killing rampage. But
well, he had the charm, he had the props, because he had his briefcase and his
gloves,
black gloves. He had an epic ending. He had
the story related
tune.
He did have his You and Me theme tune. Yeah, his ending, I think his final scenes were better than Pat Phelan's final scenes, hands down. There's not even there's not a competition there. But I think even Pat's among his other murders though, Pat still stand head and shoulders over Hillman's. I know there was the Maxine Hillman, You Should Have Stayed at the Party, Maxine, which was a classic.
Yeah.
But I think with like when he killed Patricia with a spade over the head, if you're comparing that to what we've just been talking about with Andy and Vinny and Luke, I don't think there's competition there. I think that Pat wins hands down for that one. I mean, other people have got other famous favourite villains as well, haven't they? I know there's a lot of Tony Gordon supporters out there.
Supporters.
Or lovers, or whatever the word would be. Yeah. I think he's underrated, but I would never put him up there alongside Pat or Hillman, partly because I think of the factory link, and I'm never particularly massive fans of the kind of the businessy factory stories, so that kind of weighs it down for me. But I mean,
well, there've been two like proper factory villains. You had Tony Gordon, you also had Frank Foster.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it comes to sort of like stunts and Corrie heritage, Alan Bradley was one of the biggest soap villains before
Richard Hillman came along. Yeah, it was always Alan Bradley.
By a tram in Blackpool. That was a pretty good ending.
I think that since Richard Hillman, they've tried a number of times to, top him or recapture the magic of the Hillman era, and they've not quite managed it. I mean, so there was the Tony Gordon. Who else has there been in the meantime? Charlie Stubbs, was that pre or post Richard Hillman? I can't remember. Callum, of course, he was the villain for a few years, but he was a bit. I mean, people made fun of him for being a bit of a camp villain, didn't they, Callum? But he could be quite threatening when he needed to be. But he didn't necessarily have quite the same charm as Pat did, and
you weren't
as
ever
Hillman
rooting for him as to redeem himself. And also, he was like, I would say Pat Phelan was a character. He became a character on the show rather than just being a villain. Sometimes the villains can be very separate from everything else that's going on. So Nathan, for example, he was a proper separated out villain. Yeah, so was Callum. People like Charlie Stubbs, and even Kirsty Soames, who was
husband beater.
Yeah, they were sort of characters as well as being villains. If you can see what I'm trying to get at there. Yeah,
they weren't just villains. You saw scenes with them like in their downtime.
Yeah,
which you never did with Callum.
And you didn't always want them to become wholly evil. You're always sort of wondering, are they going to be able to redeem themselves?
Yeah.
They're a lot more complicated than just a sort of cookie cutter.
Yeah, but Pat had that to the extreme, didn't he?
Yeah.
Part of his... Yeah, it was part of what I love about Pat so much was I know he's done all of this. I know that he's got the potential to do this, but also he could turn good. And I think that was a great little twist that we had last year when Nicola came along that helped us to explore, the
Pat's
what
other
Pat
side.
could be, the alternative dimension Pat, if you like, if he could put all his villainy to bed and just play a good guy, because he was a well-liked member of the community, wasn't he, on Coronation Street? He was able to pull the wool over so many people's eyes.
Even after all the flat scam stuff.
Even after the flat scam stuff. I mean, there was a time then when obviously Yasmin and Jenny and that were against him because they thought that he'd fleeced them, but he was able to convince them so well that he was the innocent in all of this.
Yeah, and I mean, when Pat kind of like realised that Nicola wasn't going to buy his excuses or see him as a good guy, I think that's when he realised there was no redemption for him. It's almost he saw himself through Nicola's eyes, and here's a chance for me to... He had quite a few moments like that, though, didn't he? He was always on the brink of redemption. When he had Andy in there, he was kind of toying with this idea of, like, am I a good guy or am I a villain?
I mean, the side that we saw with him and Summer was lovely.
I think him and Summer was the closest that ever came to him being a properly selfless good guy, because he had no reason to be so nice to Summer.
No, and Summer was so kind of innocent that she didn't ever suspect what he actually was, what he was capable of. Whereas with Nicola, there was always the idea in the back of her head: what is he as nasty as everyone's making out? And she went investigating to neighbour Lydia, didn't she? And with Summer, it was he was just like a granddad to her after her dad had died the previous summer, and she needed some kind of strong male influence. Todd had abandoned them. Billy was a drug addict, and Pat was a stable male influence on her. That scene where he chases away that guy in the car was great. It's like, oh, Pat's come to save the day.
That was really good, and it's really cool that the show gave him so many opportunities to show his humane side. I wish that we had seen a scene between Summer and Billy talking about how...
I know.
Like, Summer... I can just imagine Summer sort of saying to Billy, am I a bad person because I didn't know that Pat was so evil, and, is there something wrong with me? And Billy sort of saying no, because he had a good side to him too, because he basically rescued Billy, didn't he? He stopped him he made him go to rehab, and who's to say that didn't save his life?
Exactly.
He saved Summer from potentially being abducted by a paedophile. He saved Billy from himself and forced him to go to rehab. He saved Carla from being attacked.
He possibly saved Eileen that one time. Do you remember when Vinny sent one of his goons to go and attack Eileen? And that was kind of the moment that you kind of think, wow, Pat really does love Eileen as well, because he was terrified at the thought that somebody could have gone after his wife. Yeah, and I think you're right. It is the darkness and the light that make him such a compelling villain. He wasn't one-sided at all. It wasn't one note.
So.
But then sometimes the one note one can be, like Jez Quigley is another great villain, and he was wholly bad.
Yeah, all right. But I think that's what makes Pat the best out of all of these characters, is that he is so complicated, and at any moment you probably would have thought that he could have chucked it all away and become a regular character. I mean, if he hadn't have been killed in the bistro, and he'd gone to prison, if he had come back a few years later and said, I'm...
Is that all you get for being a serial killer? Just a few years?
No. I mean, if in prison and he said, I don't want to be like this anymore, you would have believed him. He was just so convincing, wasn't he? He always had so much potential to do either.
And that was the actor's charisma again, wasn't it? Being able to convince anybody of anything. You could see him having some kind of religious epiphany or whatever in prison, couldn't you? And you totally believe him.
Yep. So you've got there a poll about, Radio Times did a poll about, is it the best villain in Coronation Street? And they released the results 2017, just before Andy and Vinny were brutally murdered.
Phelan won. He came out on top. 39.5% of people voted for him. Hillman 28.6%. So it's quite a jump down, to be honest. But they were the two main ones. They took the lion's share for sure. Alan Bradley got 4.5%. Jez Quigley got 4.1%. Even Tracy got 4.1% as well. And I don't really count her among the Corrie villains particularly.
Not really. So I wonder if they did it now, whether it would be the same.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it?
Because, I mean, that was before he actually did kill anybody.
Yeah. I do wonder what it's so difficult to have a view on Pat Phelan that's not immediately caught up with everything that's just happened. I do wonder whether, 1, 2, 3 years down the line, what kind of legacy he's going to leave on the programme. Will people still be saying he was the best soap villain? Will we be saying that, or will we be saying, actually, Hillman was pretty good, actually?
No, I don't think so. I
don't think we will.
It's going to need to be a new contender to push Pat. I don't think... The fact that people said that before he even killed Andy and Vinny goes to show me that he only just went on to be even more villainous. So there's no point in, I don't think in hindsight it's going to change.
But back then, I mean, people had started to get sick of him. Some people had started to get sick of him, and the storyline then continued to run for another 7, 8, 9 months. I don't know, I lose count since then, and people could have got and did get too sick of him, didn't they? They were saying, he should have got rid of him at Christmas. They should have got rid of him at Whitehaven. They should have got rid of him after the Andy story, and it's a fair point that, and I feel sorry for the people that didn't like Pat. Because a lot of the criticism they have against him, I can kind of understand why they said it, even if I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
So people complained about it being too dark when Pat was in it. It was really dark, but we don't mind it because we like that sort of stuff. They said that his scenes were too violent. We didn't mind. They said that this kind of stuff shouldn't be on the before the watershed. We didn't mind. It just so happened that everything that was kind of crafted together for the Pat Phelan ticked all the right boxes for us, but I'm sure. But I mean, it's perfectly fine if you didn't agree with it.
Well, I mean, there were a few things where you know, even if you like the storyline and the character, it kind of pushed the boundaries of belief. Like, for example, how he continually got hit around the head or bashed up or beaten up, and it never seemed to have more than a temporary effect on him.
Yeah, we kind of just overlooked it, didn't we?
And we find it a bit funny, to be
exactly.
honest.
It's like, he survived another hit on the head again.
Yeah.
Isn't he?
Can't keep Cat down.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't mind it. We just kind of took it all in our stride, really. And the fact that he would often he'd always be at the right place at the right time, wouldn't he? To overhear people talking about him, or to listen to plans, or to look menacingly over them. I mean, it's just one of these things you have to overlook, really, isn't it?
It's part of the soap. It's part of the hyper reality of soaps, isn't it? It's like everything is dialed up to the nth degree, and that's why it's interesting to watch. And it's not just a bunch of people, that you could know. There is a certain charm in depicting everyday life and everyday struggles that people go through, but also the kind of exotic things, the interesting things that would never happen to you, and the things that just would never happen to anybody, like being hit over the head multiple times and having a car crash and keeping a man in a basement,
walking around smiling away from it.
It goes to show you how good Connor is as an actor, that he managed to pull everything off. It was always convincing.
Yeah.
You never... Pat was always believable to me. Sometimes the situations that he was in seemed to push against, you know, what you would accept. But Connor's performance always sold it to me.
Yeah, he was always in character. I can't think of many times where he would do things where I think, no, that Pat wouldn't say that, Pat wouldn't do that.
Never. Even when he was
Connor knew the character very well.
Yeah, and I think he was just as fascinated by Pat Phelan as everybody else was, and that goes to show you, doesn't it, that's part of the success of the character. And a lot of people didn't like the fact that he kind of he basically turned Anna into his antagonist. She sort of changed from being like a sort of a mumsy, everyday kind of every woman
fairly normal and inoffensive character,
to just his adversary. And because she couldn't beat him, she was kind of laid low and turned into this sort of bitter, snivelling fishwife kind of person. And I do wonder whether they might bring Anna back in the future, and she might be able to rekindle some of the things that people liked about her.
Well, even in her final scenes the other week, she had done. She was very level-headed, wasn't she, in those last scenes? I mean, I liked the fact that they turned Anna into a screeching harridan, because I thought the character was a little bit
boring and holier than thou as well.
Yeah, but beforehand she was a bit like, whatever. A bit, but yeah, to see him being able to break somebody so much and just to wind her up and see what she would do, I thought that was great.
If you liked Anna, you would have found that quite irritating.
Yeah, you've ruined the character. Yeah, the smugness as well. I don't think she had that as much beforehand, but just the looks that she would sometimes give. I started off thinking, that Anna, she thinks she is looking like that. But I used to then, but by the end of it, I was like living for Anna's smug face, just because I knew that Pat would eventually wipe it off again.
You're right. It did enhance Anna for me.
Yeah, but she was, as I say, when they brought her back for her final scene, she was very much in control. She had the power, and I think fair enough, she did deserve to stick that knife in the end. I've had my fun with driving Anna nuts. When they threw her into prison, I knew that she didn't deserve to get sent down, but I was still so happy that she did.
Yeah,
because I was on Phelan's side, and I think that's the sign of a good villain, isn't it? Being able to win people over and convince them to fight for your cause, and we're not. It doesn't make us a monster. It just makes us think this is a really great character.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you
take everyone loves a good villain.
If you take aside, the fact that he's an evil, you know, he was obviously supposed to be a villain. He's still one of Coronation Street's greatest characters, in my opinion. I think David is another one, who I think that through circumstance, a combination of great writing, really good acting, has just turned into like a really great fictional character who's got so many interesting facets to their personality. And it's a similar thing with Pat, in that, you know, David and Pat have kind of like both shown good and evil sides, whereas David's gone now, he's a
more
good character,
side, yeah.
But Pat went to the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
But you can certainly imagine David doing similar things, and that's what I think about some characters are so fascinating and long-lived, because of that complex nature that they have, that they're not good or bad. Yeah,
and they had to turn David a bit more into a family man in the end, but I don't think they could have kept up that evil tearaway teen.
Well, it was set in it was a sort of like based in the chronology of where he was in his life, and now he's matured out of that kind of attitude.
The thing with David as well, of course, going back to is Pat the best ever villain, what turned him into such a troubled youth was that experience that he had with Richard Hillman, and being locked up in the car and all of that, and Richard Hillman, although he was gone after the canal crash, was referenced and had this influence for years to come. We've just got this Hillman curse thing recently, which is a little bit ridiculous, but in a way, Richard Hillman, was still influencing the storylines of the Platts for many years after his death, and I hope that
Pat
Phelan becomes a legacy character, and he's not just forgotten about, never talked about again. I want to see how does he affect Eileen if and when she comes back. Is she going to be a changed person? Is she going to be more wary around men? Is she going to become a recluse? Is she going to become jumpy? Is she going to, even though she's seen the body, is she going to worry that he's not really dead? That thing you said about Summer, she's in the perfect opportunity, as David was, to have a massive turning point in her character because of this hero worship almost she had of someone who actually was an utter monster.
Yeah, but if you think about her experience of Pat, it was always positive, and I can almost see her, because up until now she's been a very selfless young girl who's tried her hardest to help the grown-ups in her life who have sort of fallen short of being a good role model for her or a good parent to her. We don't really know what it was like when, what was her real dad called? Drew.
Yeah.
Don't really know what Drew was like as a parent, but everybody's let her down since then, and Pat was the only one who didn't. And Pat's philosophy has always been, me first. That's why he's and every time he's been tested, it's been a sort of dilemma of, am I going to put someone else's interests before my own? And he's always chosen his own. Either someone else made the decision for him, like Nicola did, or it was clear that it was him or me or Andy, me or Vinny. So is Summer now going to go, all my life I've tried to put other people first, and look where it's got me. I'm going to be like Granddad Pat.
I know.
I'm going to go me first. Summer's the most important person, and turn it completely on her head.
And she could, because she is an intelligent...
Yeah,
she could be a supervillain.
And the actress also, I can see her being able to pull it off. I think she would be quite cool.
Matilda's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have said that
sort of lost...
we haven't had very many proper female villains, have we?
Yeah, and we have lost the kind of... There's not been as much of a focus on the younger characters recently, because it always was Amy as being, the kind of morally grey child character. Simon now is just completely irredeemably horrible, and Asher is got promise, but
Matilda Summer's got the brains to leapfrog over those, I think. So I mean that
could be an interesting legacy.
Yeah, definitely.
We would love it if Nicola would come back to the show, and she would obviously be sort of haunted by the reputation of her father left behind. And
when we wondered whether Nicola was going to get killed off and then Gary and Sarah would be looking after Zach, we thought, well, at least there'll be some kind of trace of Pat Phelan. There'll be Pat Phelan's blood running a lot through the street. But now there's not.
Well, I mean, if Nicola comes back, she would presumably bring Isaac back with her.
Yeah.
And it would be awesome if we got to see Isaac grow up on the street.
Yeah.
And
discover about his serial killing granddad. I just hope that they do reference it, and it has a long-term effect, because Coronation Street sometimes has a tendency of building up these massive sensationalist plots, and then once that week's over, it's kind of forgotten about. But there's a real opportunity to have another legacy character here. Speaking of sensationalisation, I wonder whether that's going to be a legacy that Pat Phelan will leave on the street. Ian McLeod's going to be starting off as producer as Coronation Street within the next few months. Is he going to look and say, tell you what, Kate Oates did well with that villain, I'm going to try and top him or equal him, and it's a very dangerous game to play, because if it's too obvious that here comes a Pat Phelan Mark II, I don't think the viewers are going to stand for it. The Pat Phelan fans will be saying, no, that he's not as good as our Pat.
Or she.
Or he or she, not as good as our Pat, don't even try. And the Pat Phelan haters will be like, oh, not again.
Here we go again.
So I think that's not a good move at all, unless they create a villain that is very, very different.
Yeah, but don't you think that now there's a Pat Phelan shaped hole in the show? Or...
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I mean, these past few weeks, I can't say that I've particularly thought it was missing anything.
No, we've given it quite high scores the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
so they've recovered well in the short term, and I think that they knew that they'd have to maintain a standard, and they knew that people would be scrutinising it post Pat Phelan to say, is the show still good? But that's you got to keep that up.
Yeah, I mean we've had Lewis as he was brought in for a couple of episodes just to be like, oh, there can be other villains, to lessen the impact maybe. There's still Josh, isn't there, kind of lingering around. That storyline's still not been completely resolved. But I do wonder whether even by the end of the year will we be introduced to the next villain. Is it going to be too much temptation for McLeod to resist? And is he going to carry on with the big dark plots, because that's what got the ratings for Kate Oates?
I know, it really did, and it's
Is it possible to do those big sensationalist plots without having a villain? I don't know, really. You need a major antagonist for that, I would have said.
We had the long storyline with Michelle and Rory, and that didn't need a sort of, those kind of dramas are still, you can still get plenty to talk about there, but the thing is that they, there's only so many real, things that you can base them off of. It's romances and divorces and affairs and, Kate Oates kind of branched out more into the, as it was predicted, crime kind of storylines, because you had the grooming storyline and then this storyline. But before then, we still had the Callum storyline, which is a drug storyline. So what does the future hold?
I don't know. Like you said, the last few weeks have shown that Coronation Street without Pat can work. People have been pretty positive about the last couple of weeks of episodes. So if you were thinking, well, Coronation Street has now been ruined by Pat, there's no way that they can recover or go back to their former glory or anything, I think
it's proven that's not the case.
It's not going to go back to how it was in the 80s or the 90s, and I don't think I'd really want it to. And I think if it did, people who are asking for it might realise that it's a different world now.
Well, I know we have got classic Coronation Street on and people enjoy watching that, but it's not going to get the same views if you put that, if you put that on prime time now. It's not going to get the same views as it would have done the first time around, because people have moved on, and obviously soaps are always being challenged by everything from changing moods and competition from other soaps to the way that we physically watch television, which has changed so drastically. It's a wonder that soaps even still get the numbers they get, because people want to binge watch high quality, like tightly produced short television shows with like Hollywood A-listers in it. And then you've got Coronation Street, which is a TV show that's been running for decades, which is about ordinary people, sometimes with extraordinary things happening to them. And it's on it's on for hours every week. Yeah,
and despite it going against the viewing tastes, actually the viewers have gone up.
Yeah.
Over the last few years.
Young
people are talking about it more, exactly. There's been so much more talk about the Coronation Street, hasn't there? It's been in the papers more, it's been reflected on social media more. So Kate Oates has done a job there.
Kate Oates and Pat Phelan.
Yeah, it is.
And if you're going to look back on Kate Oates' kind of legacy, it's going to be Pat Phelan and vice versa, because it's Kate that wanted, I assume, Pat to be so central to the story of Coronation Street, and she knew that Connor McIntyre was the right person, the compelling actor who's got so many different sides to his portrayal of Pat Phelan. That's what's kind of carried the show, and all the other stuff has been supporting it. And now that stuff that's been supporting this storyline, it's got to be the bit that carries the show.
Yeah.
And we've always known that every year you can look back and say this was the main story of Coronation Street this year.
Yeah.
And actually it hasn't always been Pat Phelan's story, because we had the Bethany grooming storyline before then and the Callum stuff and everything. So what's the next big story? And is it going to be as good as the Pat Phelan show?
Sure, some people will say yes.
I'm sure they will.
But it's going to be
But
a
they're not
tough
doing this
act to
podcast,
follow.
are
I
they?
mean, I pity anyone who's lined up to be the next villain.
I
or
don't.
the big
I think you can if you don't, you can do whatever you want now, and if you don't succeed, who's going to say bad things about you for trying? You know.
It just goes to show to me that it's all about, well, the casting is so important, and sometimes it's just luck, isn't it, that you strike gold. When they cast Conor McIntyre all that time a year ago, they didn't know how it was going to turn out, but they saw the potential in him as a character, as an actor, and they took a risk and said, right, let's give him a bit more screen time than we were originally going to, then let's bring him back, and it played out for the best. But
Yep.
if they hadn't cast Conor, Coronation Street could have been massively different.
I know. What would
It's
it have
like,
been
yeah.
like? We
What
don't
if?
know.
What if? Who knows? Okay, well, I think we're reaching the end of our Pat Phelan show now, after our many hours discussing the ups and downs of the character. Most of the ups, I have to say, but we did warn you at the beginning that we would have some kind of quiz at the end, a Pat test. And Gemma, as I didn't get you didn't get your chance to give your usual Corrie history quiz, it's only fair that you see how well I know the character, and this could be a little bit embarrassing for me.
Well,
Have you got the questions for me?
This is not going to be the best Pat Phelan quiz of all time. It's just a quick quiz to end the show out.
Yes,
okay?
you've kind of been looking at, while we've been talking, looking down Wikipedia
You reminded
and
me that I had to do this
making a
when
few
we started
questions.
recording, so
Yeah.
it's your own fault.
Okay,
Right.
so play along at home, everyone.
Right, just going to close this down so you can't get any help off the laptop.
Okay.
Right, first question.
Yeah.
When did Pat Phelan first appear?
2nd of October 2013.
Well done.
Yeah.
How many episodes did he
Oh, come on.
appear in?
362.
You're 4 out.
Oh.
358.
Oh, close.
Okay.
Maybe he's got 4 more to come. Who knows? His funeral episodes.
Right, I want 2 answers to this.
Yeah.
What is Pat's alias?
It's Frost, isn't it? Mr. Frost. Is it Alan Frost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And?
Has he got another one?
Yeah, this is a...
Oh,
this is
no, I know.
I think you probably do know, because you saw what I was looking at earlier.
Somebody, Freya Mum 85.
Freya's mummy.
Freya's mummy 85.
I have to give you a mark for that.
Yeah.
Yep, you saw me looking at them.
I did. But I didn't read it off of you.
You didn't
I
know
had
what I was looking at it for, so...
No, I didn't see that's what it was. I did remember that one.
Right. Now, this is probably the only plot story question I managed to come up with.
Go on, you go for it.
Where did Pat... This is really obscure, but it just jumped out at me when I was looking at his Wikipedia page. Where did Pat tell Luke that Andy had gone when he was pretending that Andy had moved somewhere and didn't want to speak to anybody? Where did he say that he had gone?
Was it Bristol?
Yes!
Bristol. Everybody
It
goes
was
to Bristol in
Bristol.
Coronation Street. I knew it.
Yep, okay, right. Now,
Yes.
how many complaints did Ofcom get
Oh,
for the Pat and Vinny death scenes?
not enough.
I mean, the Andy and Vinny death scenes.
I've got...
I know you've got no idea.
Okay, 450.
308, 390.
Oh, I've
390.
60 off. That's
Apparently.
not too bad.
Right, the final
Okay,
question.
go on then.
How many viewers tuned in for the Lighthouse episode?
It was between 9 and 10 million, was it?
Yes.
9.6?
No. It was 9,380,000, which was a 3-year high.
Well, with my final question getting wrong, are we going to end this episode on a low?
You got 4 right.
Oh, not bad. Could be worse, I suppose.
At 7. That's pretty good. That's over 50%.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening to today and downloading our extra special episode. Hope you enjoyed it. And especially that interview with Connor at the beginning.
That's the main attraction.
big thank you again to Connor for taking up the time. Well, for everything that you've done for the podcast, Connor.
Yeah.
From the moment we first met to all the time that you've given to the promotion that you've done for the show. It's been...
Couldn't have asked for more.
No, really couldn't. Thank you so much.
See you in
yes, we
Panto.
will see you in
the next
Panto.
time, we don't know what Connor's plans are for the future, but we do know that he's going to be in Panto in December in Manchester,
yes.
Cinderella with Les Dennis.
That should be fun.
Playing the Ugly Sisters.
I'm looking forward to that a
so
lot.
if you jonesing for another Conor McIntyre fix, or even Les Dennis, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, if you miss Michael,
tickets to go and see the show.
Right, if you want to send any feedback on this episode, about your thoughts about Pat Phelan or whatever, really, conversationstreet@gmail.com is our email address. If you don't follow us on Twitter already, we're at ConversationStir. We're on Facebook. We've got a great Facebook group there. Lots of Pat Phelan supporters, but also a good handful of
vocal Pat haters.
Exactly. So you just go along to Facebook.
And
you're
we
able to
haven't
find
banned
us
them,
easily
so there you go.
No, we allow all viewpoints.
Yeah, exactly.
How else can people contact us? That's about it, really. Yeah, Skype.
It's just on Twitter and Facebook is the main thing.
The usual ways. Right. So goodbye from me. Goodbye from Gemma. Goodbye from Connor and everybody as well.
Goodbye from Pat Phelan.
Yeah. So sad it's over. Ta-ra, everybody.